auction round in European history and a huge vote of confidence in Wales's clean energy sector, which will deliver thousands of good jobs.
Whereas how Mittendar, Mr Speaker, I was delighted to see the Erebus project in the Celtic Sea secure a contract for difference in the highly successful auction round. This is fantastic news for the floating offshore wind sector, the new frontier in renewable energy generation for local supply chains. So does the Minister agree with me that now we need long-term investment in those supply chains, not just in Wales, but in the closest landmass to most of the Celtic Sea projects in Cornwall, so that our Welsh cousins can support the unleashing of the Cornish Celtic tiger?
Secretary of State.
Can I thank him for his question? I entirely agree with my honourable friend that investment in our offshore wind sector is integral to realising our potential as a clean energy superpower, creating the thousands of high-skilled jobs in Wales and amongst our Celtic cousins in Cornwall too. And that's why last week's auction round was such a historic moment. And it's exactly why this Labour government has announced a landmark £1 billion clean energy supply chain fund to deliver offshore wind, with £300 million from Great British Energy, £400 million from the Crown Estate and £300 million from the offshore wind industry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Secretary of State quite rightly mentioned the jobs and growth which will result from the projects at Alamore and Erebus in the Celtic Sea. But we also saw that the price in auction round 7 was 40% lower than the equivalent for new gas-fired power stations, and were reminded by Putin's latest remarks of the volatility of the gas price. Does she agree, therefore, that Welsh consumers will benefit from cheaper bills and it will give us greater security, as well as the benefits she outlined earlier?
Can I thank him for his question? He's absolutely right. You know, this was the most successful round in European history, as I've mentioned. It's the first project, Alamore is the first project in Wales in offshore wind to win a contract in over a decade. And Erebus will be Wales's first floating offshore wind farm. They will power almost 1 million homes. They'll bring £2.6 billion of investment to Welsh coastal and industrial communities. But as he says, most importantly, they'll create thousands of jobs. They'll bring down bills as we produce more and cheaper clean energy and we gain our energy independence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I also want to congratulate the Government and welcome the announcement last week of the most successful European auction round to date. It's great news for the UK, it's great news for our action on climate change, and it bodes well for the Celtic Sea, the full Celtic Sea floating offshore wind opportunity, which is important for Exeter, the wider South West and for Wales too. Will the Secretary of State and the Minister explain how this landmark step forward for offshore wind will mean new jobs and lower bills for constituents in Exeter, Wales and right across the country?
Thank him for his question. I mean, the Celtic Sea is at the frontier of our green energy revolution. The capacity for offshore wind will support over 5,000 new jobs and bring billions of pounds of investment. Erebus is a test and demonstration project, and that's going to kick-start the early development of flow in Wales, ahead of larger projects being advanced through the Crown Estate's 3 flow sites in the Celtic Sea that have been leased to Equinor, Gwent Glass and Ocean Winds. And I can't stress enough, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity for Wales, as it is for the South West, and it's why this Labour government is doing whatever it takes to realise that potential.
Jamie Stowe.
Mr Speaker, when it comes to clean energy, I think we're all delighted to see that a new nuclear power plant will be constructed in Wales. I wonder if the Minister agrees with me that it is worse than a crying shame, in fact a disgrace, that the Scottish Government sets its face totally against any nuclear developments in Scotland, such as at Dounreay in my constituency.
I thank him for raising this, and particularly as it's Nuclear Week this week. We have announced the new fleet of small modular reactors at Wilver, expected to support 3,000 jobs at peak construction, power up to 3 million homes, and also the capacity for further fleets in the future. Why the Scottish Government refuse investment in nuclear? So not only do they waste money, but they refuse investment and jobs in their own country.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for that answer? And she's absolutely right to develop the issue of green energy and clean energy as well. But there's an Irish Sea that separates Northern Ireland and Wales. The winds that blow up and down the east and west coasts of England and Wales and Northern Ireland It's something that we can all take advantage of. So when it comes to working together with the Northern Ireland Assembly, with other people who can take advantage, has the Minister had an opportunity to discuss those matters and that potential for the future for us all? Thank you.
Okay.
I'd be very happy to have the conversation with the honourable gentleman about this. I mean, we're investing in our green industries because this is how we bring down bills for everybody. It's how we secure our energy supplies for everybody, and we create jobs and improve living standards for everybody.
Shadow Minister Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mid Wales is beautiful, but plans that would see 200-metre tall wind turbines at Radnor Forest, turbines twice the height of Big Ben, will blight the landscape, impact local communities and harm the area's vital tourism sector. And we're seeing similar proposals across Brecon and Radnorshire. The concerns of local communities, businesses and councils must be properly considered in planning decisions for energy infrastructure, not simply overwritten by government ministers at Cardiff Bay to meet their own agenda. Does the Minister agree?
Secretary of State.
She obviously doesn't want energy bills to come down. She doesn't want jobs in mid Wales. She doesn't want the investment to happen. Labour is the only party committed to our renewable energy revolution. Plaid, the Greens, the Lib Dems all tried to block renewable infrastructure. The SNP reject the jobs, as we've just heard. And now the Tories and Reform don't want it either. They want to scrap net zero altogether.
Dave Chadwick, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has been highly critical of the legitimate concerns my constituents have raised about the numerous wind farm proposals across Mid Wales. Well, now the MOD have raised their concerns that at least one of the proposed wind farms has the potential to form a physical obstruction to air traffic movements and military activities at the Sennybridge training area. So, if Labour won't listen to the concerns being raised by my residents, will they at least listen to their own military?
I thank you for his question. Can I suggest that he raises that with Ministry of Defence ministers? I'm very happy if he'd like to contact me afterwards, and I'll raise it with the Secretary of State for Defence.
Minister Roberts.
On the 9th of January, Consumer Energy Solutions went into administration. 300 people across Wales lost their jobs. In my constituency alone, more than 40 households have told me they've been left in limbo, often without heating or hot water. Many are elderly or ill. Given that her government scrapped the Eco4 scheme abruptly, what support will be provided to make sure that householders aren't left to pay after CES walk away?
Secretary of State.
I thank her for raising this. I mean, I really do feel for people who have found themselves in this situation, including her constituents, through absolutely no fault of their own. And Mr. Speaker, she will know that we inherited this scheme from the Conservative government, and both the Eco and GB insulation scheme had well-documented problems. That's why we took the decisive action to end the schemes, and we're urgently working with scheme providers to ensure that customers of Consumer Energy Solutions are supported, and we will provide further updates as soon as possible.
Minister Roberts.
We're expecting an announcement on the Warm Homes Plan, which is, of course, to be welcomed, but we can't rerun the errors of Eco4. There was an investigation by the National Audit Office into wall insulation, which revealed fraud and shoddy work. Will she, therefore, join me in calling for a public investigation into Eco4 air source heat pumps and solar panels so we get a full independent evaluation of the incidents of bad practice, questionable profits and fraud?
Secretary of State.
I would simply say what I've already said to the Honourable Lady, which is we inherited these schemes. They had well-documented problems. That is why we have taken decisive action to end the schemes. And she will have seen our Warm Homes announcement today, which is a £15 billion fund in order to help people across the country.
Davies.
Question time, please.
Secretary of State.
I hold a range of discussions with ministers in the Welsh Government, including about our crucial investment into the Welsh Rail network. We're investing at least £445 million into Welsh Rail to right years of underfunding by previous Tory governments. This will mean more stations, new stations, more and faster trains on the key lines in North and South Wales and into England to improve cross-border connectivity, create jobs and boost economic growth.
And Davies.
Mr Llavarydd. The Treasury has confirmed that the Northern Powerhouse Rail will be classified again as an England-Wales project, depriving Wales again of £1 billion in funding. Instead, we are being asked to celebrate £455 million spent over 10 years in East Wales. This means no electrification beyond Cardiff, no new station for St Clears, even though it was promised through the levelling up, and no upgrades for Carmarthen Station. So what influence can the Secretary of State bring to bear on the Treasury so that the 1.5 million people who live outside the investment area, who are excluded, get the funding that they deserve?
Here.
Secretary of State, the truth.
Heavy rail projects in both countries are classified as England and Wales, whether the track is in Wales, in England or in both, and they don't attract Barnet consequentials because heavy rail is reserved. So examples of such projects include Padeswood in North Wales and the regeneration of Cardiff Central Station. Surely she must know that the economic corridor from North Wales to the North West is vital for regional integration and the economic growth of North Wales. And the scheme paves the way for more services, more regular services and faster services across North Wales and the North West.
Andrew Ranger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the Welsh Labour Government introduced a £1 bus fare cap for young people. Since then, these reduced fares have been used on 2 million journeys. Earlier this month, Welsh Labour announced in my constituency of Wrexham that after the Senedd election in May, we will build on this success with a £2 bus fare for all fares and over 100 new routes across Wales. Would my right honourable friend join me in supporting this announcement, and can she update the House on what else the UK and Welsh Labour governments are doing together to improve Wales's transport infrastructure?
Secretary of State.
Well, the introduction of the £1 bus fare cap for young people and now a £2 cap on all fares from the Welsh Labour Government has been great news and will help everyone with the cost of living. And the 100 new bus routes right across Wales that will happen if the Welsh Labour are re-elected in May will further help people take advantage of the new opportunities and jobs we're creating across Wales. Of course, all this has been made possible because there are two Labour governments working together for Wales. Our record-breaking budget settlement for the Welsh Government has delivered nearly £6 billion more in spending power, enabling them to invest more in transport and other public services.
Mims Davis, Shadow Secretary of State.
Following an FOI, several questions at the dispatch box and my pre-Christmas letter to the Secretary of State, a serious explanation on railway funding in Wales is still lacking. Previously, she said in the Chamber, we are investing to right the years of underfunding. And to the Select Committee, there was a widespread agreement. Many others have expressed similar sentiments. Mr. Speaker, this isn't evidence of underfunding. It's an opinion. So will she finally tell the House what method she is using to reach her opinion and outline how much Network Rail intends to invest in Welsh railways?
Secretary of State.
The honourable member will know very well from my reply to her letter that her assertion is fundamentally wrong because she's referring to a combination of operations, maintenance, renewals and enhancement funding for the total figures under Conservative governments. This Labour government has announced nearly £500 million investment in Welsh Rail, specifically and solely in enhancement funding. And that money is being front-loaded in this spending review period to deliver new stations, more and faster trains as soon as possible. But, Mr. Speaker, she should carry on desperately trying to defend her party's appalling record in government because all she's doing is reminding everybody about it.
Whitney.
Question 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK and Welsh governments are working closely together in supporting the agricultural sector, particularly so when it comes to cross-border movements and disease control. As always, our message to farmers is to remain vigilant, vaccinate where possible, source responsibly and test. Through this approach, we can minimise disruption.
John Whitby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the integrated nature of livestock markets across England and Wales, farmers in my constituency are still facing challenges from restrictions linked to blue tongue. Could the Secretary of State update the House on what discussions have occurred with DEFRA and the Welsh Government about minimising disruption to cross-border livestock movements arising from blue tongue testing and certification requirements?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he's absolutely right to raise the integrated nature of livestock markets across Wales and England. And I'd like to reassure him that this government is working together with the Welsh Government on all animal health-related issues, including blue tongue. I regularly speak to my colleague Hugh Aranka-Davies, Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, on these matters. Through this collective effort, we've ensured that livestock movements can continue. But I will stress once again the importance of being vigilant, vaccinating, sourcing responsibly and testing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What assessment has the Minister made of the value of a single UK-wide digital livestock traceability system to support Welsh farmers and reduce welfare and compliance risks for Northern Ireland processors who rely on Welsh farmers?
Minister.
I'm sorry, it's very hard to hear that question, but let me assure him that our new SPS agreement with the EU will facilitate the smooth flow of agri-food and plants from Wales to Northern Ireland, protecting the UK's internal market, reducing cost to business and improving consumer choice.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welsh language broadcasting plays a critical role in shaping Welsh identity and culture. S4C has played a vital role in helping revitalise the language and ensures it's kept relevant amongst the ever-growing number of people who speak it, not just in Wales but around the world. Their essential contribution is reflected in the BBC Charter Review Green Paper published just last month.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welsh does very well out of broadcasting, but I'm glad the Western Isles are well represented on the airwaves just now. The standout star of Traitors, this season's Traitors, is Stephen Libby from the Isle of Lewis. I think he's going to win it this weekend. I'm glad Gaelic has its place in the government's Green Paper on broadcasting, but the UK government gives S4C £7.5 million a year to help in digital broadcasting. BBC Alapa, the Scottish channel, gets nothing. Will the Minister join me in my efforts to get the UK government to re-engage with Gaelic broadcasting as a cultural and economic dynamo?
Minister.
Well, I think we're all glued to the traitors this season, and with the exodus from the Tory benches to reform, it's hard not to believe that we're actually living through real-life traitors. But I thank my honourable friend for his question. Welsh and Gaelic were the first languages of their nations and have a strong social, cultural and economic significance. As a Welsh speaker myself, I know just how important that is. This government recognises the contribution MG Alba makes to the lives of Gaelic speakers across Scotland and the UK. And my honourable friend will be aware of the BBC Charter Review launched in December, considering how the BBC can best support minority languages, including Gaelic.
The Minister will be aware that Ofcom is currently consulting on a draft code of practice for the prominence of public service broadcasters in the digital platforms. Does she agree that it's essential that SPREC is included in any measures that come out of that consultation so that they do have greater prominence on smart TVs and other digital platforms?
Thank you. My honourable friend across the benches raises a very, very important point, and one which I've regularly discussed with S4C and my colleagues in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. It is fantastic news that last week the BBC and S4C announced plans for a major new streaming partnership, giving greater prominence for S4C on the iPlayer. But I know there's more to do on this issue, and I will continue to work with my colleagues and broadcasters on this matter.
Chair of the Committee, Ruth Jones.
Mr. Speaker, the Welsh Affairs Select Committee took evidence from the CEO and Chair of S4C last week, and it was good to hear their plans for the future. So what discussions has the Minister had with S4C and other broadcasters to further the development of the Welsh language across Wales and beyond?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question, raising the importance and sustainability of S4C, and it is that is crucially reflected in the BBC Charter Review launched just in December, and I will continue having those conversations with my colleagues here in Welsh Government, but also with the broadcasters themselves.
Rachel Taylor.
Question 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer questions 5 and 6 together. This government is absolutely determined to improve the cost of living for families across Wales and the whole of the UK. It's why we're benefiting 69,000 children in Wales by scrapping the 2-child limit. It's why we're slashing household energy bills by an average of £150 a year, and it's why we're again increasing the national minimum and living wage, building on the previous increase which boosted the incomes of up to 160,000 workers in Wales.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The latest interest rate cut, the 6th since Labour formed this government, is great news for mortgage holders in Wales, in North Warwickshire and Bedworth and across the UK. Bringing down the cost of family mortgages by almost £1,400 a year. Would the Secretary of State update the House on how this government's policies are helping to strengthen our economy and improve the cost of living as a result?
Secretary of State.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? She's absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. This government is supporting people across Wales and across the UK with the cost of living. Since we came into government, households who are now taking out a new mortgage are saving around £1,400 a year on their mortgage repayments. We've increased the state pension by 4.8%, and that will take effect in April, benefiting 700,000 pensioners across Wales, and uprating universal credit standard allowance by over 6%, the first ever permanent real terms increase, benefiting 320,000 households in Wales.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of living is still a major concern for my constituents in Llanelli, so I very much welcome the decision by this Labour government to give householders £150 help with their domestic energy bills. But can the Secretary of State explain exactly who is eligible and when and how they will receive this money?
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? Energy bills are a significant issue for people across the country, and that's why from April this year all households will see an average £150 reduction in costs on their energy bills thanks to this Labour government. Energy suppliers will pass on the savings automatically to households, and she will have seen today the launch of our Warm Homes Plan, the £15 billion fund, and in Wales this will make grants available for households to replace gas boilers with heat pumps, and it will mean stronger standards on landlords who privately rent homes so they are safer, warmer and more affordable to run.
James Davies, Shadow Secretary of State.
Wales could be disproportionately affected by US tariffs, which could be a challenge for many Welsh businesses. The words of Labour First Minister Baroness Leonard Morgan in her correspondence to the Prime Minister. Lots of talk about traitors, but Mr. Speaker, we, the Conservatives, over the past 27 years, are the ones who've seriously scrutinised, challenged and exposed the failings of Welsh Labour, clearly propped up by Plaid and the Lib Dems. So will she confirm it's the two fabled Labour governments who simply cannot work together who are just making the cost of living and unemployment worse in Wales?
Secretary of State.
Wages are up. Wages are up. Inward investment is up. Inactivity is down on the year. Unemployment is down on the year. And we've had 6 cuts in interest rates so that families taking out a new mortgage are £1,400 a year better off than they were under the Tories.
Sean Davis.
Number 7, sir.
Minister.
As two governments, we are committed to working together to keep cross-border arrangements fair, transparent and patient-centred. I'm proud that last year's spending review saw the largest financial settlement in the history of devolution. Working in partnership, we will fix the NHS and make it fit for the future.
John Davis.
Mr. Speaker, the incredible Lincoln Davis Cancer Charity provides life-saving and life-changing cancer care, working with the NHS to support patients across Wales, Telford and wider Shropshire. The charity and the NHS has plans to double capacity of cancer treatment. I am proud to support this campaign. Will the Secretary of State and the Minister meet with me to discuss how she, the Welsh Government and the Welsh NHS can work together to double cancer treatment across our area?
I thank my honourable friend for raising the important work of the Lincoln Davis charity. I understand their appeal is seeking to raise £5 million to grow cancer care awareness in his area. This government is committed to catching cancer earlier and treating it faster. And I'd be very happy to meet my honourable friend to discuss the charity's fundraising campaign.
There you go.
Paris Health Board been categorising the needs of its patients based on cost rather than on their clinical need, and that's causing a real problem for the Robert James and Agnes Hunt Orthopaedic Hospital in my constituency and the associated Headley Court Veteran Centre, because they need to prioritise patients based on clinical need and not on whether Paris House Board will pay for them this year. What is the Secretary of State for Wales doing about that problem with Paris Health Board? So we're treating patients based on their clinical need and in a way that my hospital trust can manage.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for raising this, and I certainly can write to her with the details on the Powys Health Board and what we're doing, but I can assure her that this government is committed to working with the Welsh Government to ensure cross-border arrangements are fair and transparent and focused on patient needs. This is two Labour governments working together in partnership and delivering together.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, may I extend a warm welcome to the President of the Storting, the Norwegian Parliament, and his delegation, who are with us in the gallery today. We start with questions to Prime Minister Dr. Jeevan Sanda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent days, I've spoken extensively to our international allies, including European leaders and others, the US and NATO. We will continue to engage constructively to resolve issues, particularly relating to international security, applying the principles and values that I set out on Monday. Mr. Speaker, in addition this week, the Government has announced a landmark investment to support children with special educational needs, overhauled our water system, and today launched a £15 billion plan to create warm homes. At home and abroad, this Labour government is delivering for the British people. This meeting I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We face an affordability crisis in this country. In the short term, our dependence on fossil fuels lead to a rise in energy bills, and in the longer term, the aftershocks of Thatcher mean there are not enough good non-graduate jobs. And that's why today's Warm Homes Plan is such good news. Making life affordable. Batteries, solar, home insulation. Getting bills down, wages rising, making life affordable. But we must go further. So can I ask the Prime Minister they would do even more to make sure that life is affordable for my
the Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend? I know how much he cares about making life affordable. Mr. Speaker, we're taking £150 off energy bills. That's £300 for the 6 million poorest families, including almost 3,700 households in his constituency. The Warm Homes Plan we're announcing today is the biggest ever public investment in upgrading British homes. It will lift 1 million households out of fuel poverty, tackling the cost of living. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the Prime Minister following our lead on children accessing social media? In particular, can I thank the Shadow Education Secretary, 61 Labour MPs and the Greater Manchester Mayor for forcing him to think again. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and I agree. The future of Greenland should only be decided by the people of Greenland. When the Prime Minister made this point to President Trump on Monday, did the President agree or disagree?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, engaging constructively on international security matters hugely, particularly when it comes to security in the Arctic, and that's the context in which this discussion is going on in relation to Greenland. As we engage constructively, I have made my position clear on our principles and values. The first of those is that the future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The second is that threats of tariffs to pressurise allies are completely wrong. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to engage constructively. I've had many international calls in recent days, and the Prime Minister of Denmark is coming to the United Kingdom tomorrow for bilateral talks. But I do want to be clear with the House. I will not yield, Britain will not yield on our principles and values about the future of Greenland under threats of tariffs. And that is my clear position.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to hear the Prime Minister say that. We all know that the people of Greenland do not want to be ruled by America. But does he agree that just as those in Greenland should decide their own future, so should the Chagosians?
Mr. Speaker, I've made out my position on Greenland absolutely clear on Monday and a moment ago. President Trump deployed words on Chagos yesterday that were different to his previous words of welcome and support when I met him in the White House. He deployed those words yesterday for the express purpose of putting pressure on me and Britain in relation to my values and principles on the future of Greenland. Mr. Speaker, he wants me to yield on my position, and I'm not going to do so. Given that that was his express purpose, I'm surprised the Leader of the Opposition has jumped on the bandwagon. I had understood her position. Mr. Speaker, I had understood her position to be that she supported the government's position on the future of Greenland. Now she appears to support words by President Trump to undermine the government's position on the future of Greenland. She's chosen naked opportunism over the national interest.
Mr. Speaker, we'll note that when I asked him what the President told him, he couldn't tell us. Now he expects us to believe he knows what's going on in President Trump's mind. Let me remind him, his Deputy Prime Minister, then Foreign Secretary, used to say that if President Trump didn't like the deal, it wouldn't go ahead. And let's look at what President Trump actually said. The Chagos deal is an act of great stupidity and a sign of total weakness. We didn't need President Trump to tell us that. We've been saying this for 12 months. And let's remind the Prime Minister, President Trump thought that we were doing this, that the Prime Minister is doing this for money. The Prime Minister is giving away territory we own and paying £35 billion for the privilege. Why doesn't he just scrap this terrible deal and put the money into our armed forces?
Prime Minister. The words from President Trump were expressly intended to put pressure on me to yield on my principles. What he said about Chagos was literally in the same sentence as what he said about Greenland. That was his purpose. And the future of Greenland is a binary issue that is splitting the world at the moment with material consequences. I've been clear and consistent in my position on the future of Greenland. The future is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The Leader of the Opposition has taken 3 positions in 10 days. 10 days ago, she said Greenland was, in her words, a second-order issue. 4 days ago, she said she supported our position on Greenland. Now she's backing arguments intended to undermine our position, Britain's position on Greenland. This is an important national moment, and yet again, the Leader of the Opposition has shown she is incapable of rising to it.
I've already told him we agree on Greenland. I'm asking about the Chagos deal. That money, that £35 billion, should go to the armed forces. Mr. Speaker, the world is changing. We are in a very different place, the most dangerous international environment since the end of the Cold War. Last week, the head of the armed forces, not me, the head of the armed forces warned that our military faces a £28 billion shortfall. Is he right?
Prime Minister! Mr. Speaker, I'm proud we're spending more on defence than any time since the last Labour government. The Strategic Defence Review in fact, the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That's £270 billion this Parliament, making defence an engine of growth. That is a stark contrast. Ben Wallace, the longest-serving Conservative Defence Secretary, openly admitted that under their watch our armed forces were hollowed out.
Order, order, order. Mr Bowitt and Mr Cartledge, it is continuous week in, week out, and there's a couple over here who will also be going out for a cup of tea with you. Please, calm it down, or you know the consequence. Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, they shout on a Wednesday and they defect on a Thursday. The loudest shouter used to be the former Shadow Justice. We should take a note of who's shouting most loudly this week.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about defections. Let me tell him that when I had someone undermining my party, I sacked him. If he sacked... Mr Speaker, if he sacked...
We're going to get through this Prime Minister's questions. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition and I want to hear the Prime Minister. Those who don't may leave the chamber. Kemi Badenoch.
Mr Speaker, we all know that if he sacked everyone undermining his party, his front bench would be empty. But these questions I'm asking, these questions, well, jokes aside, these questions are about our national interest. These questions are about our national interest. We support our armed forces in every possible way. Later today, my party will vote to protect our veterans from unfair prosecution. He is ordering his MPs to vote against them. In our national interest, and for the sake of all the brave people in the armed forces, past, present and future, will the Prime Minister do the right thing and vote in support of our veterans, not against them?
Mr Speaker, she's claiming strength. She read the guy's defection letter and then at that point decided to sack him. What was she going to do? Correct the typos and give it back to him? She should have sacked him when he made disgraceful comments about faces in Birmingham, and she failed to do so. And she smiled, saying it's a good thing she's cleared out, a good thing there's fewer Tory MPs. The rest of the country agrees with her completely in relation to that. On the question of veterans' protection, under the last government, they passed legislation which was struck down, leaving our veterans utterly exposed. We're putting in place proper measures to protect them.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about leadership. Three of his own cabinet ministers told the Times on Saturday that he needed to learn from me.
Order! I'll tell you now, I'm having no more. Do we understand each other? Thank you. Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. But back to the national interest. Instead of acting in it, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister just tries to get through the day. On the Chinese spy hub embassy, he's too weak. On Chagos, he's too weak. On funding for the armed forces, he's too weak. On protecting our veterans from prosecution, he's too weak. Yes. Mr Speaker, I will support the Prime Minister when he does the right thing. But time after time, this Prime Minister has done the wrong thing for our country. Isn't the truth that he is too weak to stand up for our national interests?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I've spent the week working with our NATO allies to protect our national security and ensure we're having unity in NATO. That's a matter of national importance. She's utterly failed to rise to the occasion and show the solidarity she could have shown in this House. She spent the week trying to hold together what's left of the Tory party. And she says I should learn from her. She has no judgment. Only a week ago, she was saying in relation to Greenland, she shrugged and said it's some second-order issue. Terrible judgment. Then she flip-flopped with 3 different positions in 10 days on Greenland. She said Liz Truss's mini-budget was 100% right. She said last week she was 100% confident there'll be no more defections just before the latest defection. I'm beginning to think her judgment isn't 100% reliable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. NHS waiting lists in Birmingham are down by almost a quarter under Labour and still falling. That's more than 28,000 people no longer stuck waiting for essential treatment. Yes, there are challenges still, but they are being addressed and progress is being made. Does he agree that this progress must be sustained, including by reducing ambulance waiting times?
Minister. I'm pleased to confirm, Mr. Speaker, that last week saw the second biggest fall in NHS waiting times for 15 years. Waiting lists down by more than 300,000, recruitment of GPs an extra 2,900, and ambulances are arriving nearly 15 minutes faster this winter than they were last year. There is much more to do. That's why we're delivering the biggest upgrade to our ambulance fleet for many years. That progress has been made possible by Labour's decisions that were opposed by the parties opposite.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We remember how Tony Blair ignored warnings from these benches and tied himself to an unpopular American president and a disastrous foreign policy, while close allies like Canada and France looked on in horror. With Donald Trump increasingly acting like a crime boss running a protection racket, threatening to smash up our economy unless he gets his hands on Greenland, will the Prime Minister avoid Blair's historic mistake, take our advice this time, and join Prime Minister Carney and President Macron in standing up far more strongly to President Trump?
Prime Minister.
Well, he clearly isn't listening. I said I will not yield on the principles and values that I uphold, this country upholds in relation to the future of Greenland. But the relationship with the US matters, especially on defence, security and intelligence and nuclear capability, also on trade and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, whilst he's trying to get sound bites, we mustn't forget a war is raging in Europe. It is in its 4th year. The Russians are raining bombs down on Ukrainian civilians day and night. Temperatures were -20 in Kyiv last night. 60% is without power. People are erecting tents to keep themselves warm. We have to work with our allies, including the US, on security guarantees to make sure we can do what we must do in relation to Ukraine. Now, that does not mean we agree with the US on everything, and I've been absolutely clear on my position on Greenland and my position on tariffs, but it is foolhardy to think that we should rip up our relationship with the US, abandon Ukraine, and so many other things that are important to our defence, security and intelligence.
Of course, we're not arguing that, Mr. Speaker. We're arguing he follows France and Canada, our close allies. But here's one thing that we can agree on, Mr. Speaker, that the UK strengthens our defensive capabilities, like the Prime Minister said earlier. But, Mr. Speaker, the government is going far too slow in investing in our defensive industries. It hasn't even published the defence investment plan that was promised last autumn. And that delay is putting critical industries like helicopter manufacturing based in Yeovil at risk. Putin is waging a war in Europe. Trump is threatening to undermine NATO. We have to rearm fast. So why won't the Prime Minister just get on with buying great British helicopters made in the West Country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's about the cheer across the whole country. Mr. Speaker, we are increasing defence spend to the biggest spend since the last Labour government. We are doing that because of the decisions we took at the budget in relation to the money that's available. He wants more money on defence spending. He wants it faster. What did he do at the budget? Did he stand up and say, I support this? No, he voted against it, against the measures necessary to carry out the upgrade.
Steve Yem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, on Christmas Day, my constituent Beryl Barrett passed away after tragically falling into an unrepaired pothole, and I'm sure the whole House will wish to share my condolences with the family. In my constituency of Mansfield, there are literally thousands of potholes in our roads which Notts County Council are failing to repair. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's time the Council took action to repair our roads? And will he meet with Beryl's family so that we can work together to ensure that no more accidents like this happen again?
Prime Minister.
Can I send my deepest sympathies to Beryl's family, and I will make sure the Roads Minister meets the family at the earliest opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it shows why tackling potholes really matters. We're investing £2 billion in East Midlands to fix the roads and improve local transport. We're also putting in place tough new standards so that councils must prove they're fixing roads properly. And I'm pleased many excellent Labour councils across the country are leading by example.
Dr. Ellie-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, our rivers, lakes and seas have paid the price of a failing system, so the Water White Paper is a welcome first step in beginning to set things right. But there's a glaring gap. Agricultural pollution contributes 40% of the pollution in our waterways, but merits only one single page in this white paper. Can the PM tell me why on earth this is the case, and when he will start working with farmers to support river-friendly farming practices and treat agricultural pollution as seriously as sewage pollution?
Prime Minister. We inherited a real mess on water, and we're taking the most effective and far-reaching measures to deal with it. But I have to say, as someone who stood to lead her party, I wonder what she makes of how her leader is responding to this global uncertainty. Because what he's saying is this is the time, this is the moment to withdraw from NATO. This is the time to kick the US out of our military bases. This is the time to negotiate, hear this, with Putin to give up our nuclear deterrent. I'm sure Putin will be very quick on the line for that one. It's as reckless and irresponsible as their plan to legalise heroin and crack cocaine. That's the Green Party now, high on drugs, soft on Putin.
Can I just say, we don't ask opposition questions. They're coming to the Prime Minister, not the other way around. Right, let us move on. Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. West Dunbartonshire is set to benefit from record UK Labour government investment. £60 million of local growth funding just announced for the Glasgow City region, to add to the £20 million for Dumbarton Town Centre regeneration. Add to that the £20 million Pride in Place funding for my hometown of Clydebank, and the £1.5 million immediate impact funding. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is in stark contrast to the SNP, who abandoned their communities, and demonstrates the difference a Labour government makes to West Dunbartonshire and to Scotland?
Well, I'm very pleased, Mr. Speaker, we're backing his hometown of Clydebank with £20 million of Pride in Place funding. And just this week we hosted a reception meeting people working hard to change their neighbourhoods across the whole of the United Kingdom. That's Labour delivering on national renewal. And as he rightly says, compare that to the SNP, more interested in squabbling over independence than using a record settlement to fix Scotland's public services.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Challenging economic inactivity and supporting the vulnerable across the country is something that we all want to address. So would you be surprised to learn that in Northern Ireland around 11,000 people previously supported by the UK's Shared Prosperity funding programmes will see those programmes cut dramatically, compounded with 400 job losses? So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he support those cuts of those vital programmes? And will he arrange an urgent meeting for me with the relevant decision maker in government and the organisations who have been impacted, so that these changes and challenges can be resolved?
Prime Minister.
We've delivered a record settlement for Northern Ireland in the budget to strengthen public services and to kick-start growth. And the Local Growth Fund, designed actually in partnership with the Executive, will see £45 million every year to support local growth. But I'm very happy to make sure that ministers meet him to discuss the particular concerns that he has.
Kirstine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1.5 million women in the UK live with endometriosis, which is a painful and life-changing condition. As chair of the Endometriosis APPG, I met Jessica Smith and Endo Warriors West Lothian, to discuss their campaigns for a national endometriosis registry to capture and audit diagnosis, treatment and outcomes. Will he join me to commend the work of Jessica, Endo Warriors West Lothian and Endometriosis UK, and will he meet with me to discuss creating a registry to improve the lives of women living with endometriosis?
Prime Minister. Well, let me pay tribute to her and all women and others who are campaigning on these vitally important issues. Far too many women are left waiting in serious pain for care, and that's why we're investing £8 million in research on diagnosis, treatment and pain management. I know the Minister for Women's Health will be keen to talk to her about her proposals and the issues, and I thank her for raising it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a constituent not yet 30 years old, a civil servant who's just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. She has been told she has a very short time to live. Because of her condition, she was given a retirement date, which was just last week. She has not received notification of any actual pension payment and has spent long hours trying to contact Capita. HMRC has claimed that all outstanding documentation has been supplied to Capita in November. I've written to the Chancellor, contacted the MP hotline and Capita. It still remains unresolved. Can the Prime Minister, along with the Chancellor, help to get this action resolved immediately?
Prime Minister. Can I thank him for raising this case, and I'm truly sorry to hear about his constituent. If he wouldn't mind following up with the details of the case, I will make sure that it's dealt with urgently on behalf of his constituent.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I welcomed Bermondsey PC Kevin Webster to Parliament after his recognition as Met's PC of the Year 2025. Will the Prime Minister commend Kevin for his local work and that of Southwark Labour Council's amazing nighttime antisocial behaviour team? Will he tell us when they'll have new powers under the Crime and Policing Bill? And will he remind the Met that its access standards require all local officers like Kevin to be a maximum 20-minute walk from their ward, a policy currently going unmet in Rotherhithe?
Prime Minister. Can I congratulate Kevin and thank police across our country working hard to protect our communities? The party opposite decimated local policing and we're restoring it. There will be 3,000 more neighbourhood police on our streets by spring, an example of the change people will feel this year. Our Crime and Policing Bill will give officers more powers to tackle knife crime, shoplifting and antisocial behaviour. I want officers to have those powers as swiftly as possible. The Tories and Reform voted against them.
My constituents in Chester South and Eddisbury are deeply concerned by proposed cuts to police community support officers across Cheshire. The Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, Dan Price, was silent on this issue, seemingly content to see numbers slashed across the county until residents and local MPs spoke out. Now he seeks to present himself as campaigning to save PCSOs, whilst proposing to substantially increase the precept, all at the same time as planning to increase spending on his office by £513,000 next year. Does the Prime Minister agree that this represents a failure of leadership and that that money would be far better spent increasing PCSOs on our streets?
Prime Minister. This comes from the party that broke our criminal justice system, just like the fact they broke our economy and our NHS. They hollowed out local policing. We're restoring it. There will be 3,000 new officers in spring of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The thug in the White House has shown that he doesn't listen to grovelling or sycophancy. He'll continue to harm British interests, no matter how compliant we are, and, like all bullies, he will always find the weakest link. Will the Prime Minister close ranks with our European allies and commit to retaliatory tariffs?
Well said. Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I've made our position clear. I've set out my principles. I'm not going to yield on those principles. But as I said on Monday, of course we need to protect our national interest, and we will always protect our national interest. But simply hurtling at the first opportunity into a trade war is going to hurt working people and businesses across the country. And that is why I'm working hard to make sure we do not get to that point, and I'll continue to act in the national interest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Prime Minister may be aware that my local authority in the East Riding of Yorkshire is the lowest funded per pupil for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and that his local authority in Camden is the highest, an inequality he has repeatedly pledged to end. Well, Mr. Speaker, the results are in. Next year, children in my local area will receive just under £1,000. Children in his local area will receive over £3,800. The gap is getting wider. So can the Prime Minister explain to the House why he thinks children in my constituency are worth so much less than the children in his?
We're applying their formula, the one that you put in place in government. We're changing it. Special educational needs is probably raised with me more than any other issue in this House. We're proposing reforms. The issue he's highlighted, the problem he's highlighted...
Order. Sorry, Prime Minister. Mr Oldham, as Shadow Secretary of Transport, you'll begin the express train and it'll be out of here.
I think he may be making himself the next candidate for the Thursday defection, because it's oh, maybe it's someone else. Those that shout loudest end up over there. And I thank Reform are supporting our recycling moves, because soon they're going to be a party entirely made up of...
Order, Prime Minister. Mr Holden, I think you need to leave. No. Prime Minister. OK, Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Police officers in Greater Manchester are facing exceptional pressures as they work to keep our communities safe from horrific terror threats, hate crime, organised crime and regular mass large-scale protests. But despite this, GMP received the second lowest percentage funding increase of any police force under the provisional settlement, leaving it £12 million worse off. Now, I know the Prime Minister will share my concerns, so will he urgently work with the GM Mayor, Deputy, myself and Greater Manchester MPs to ensure that GMP has the funding it truly needs to keep our communities safe?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her and say I was humbled to visit Greater Manchester Police after the Heaton Park synagogue attack. The professionalism and bravery that they showed was remarkable. Mr Speaker, we've boosted total police funding, and Greater Manchester will receive up to £902 million, an increase of over £31 million. I want to reassure my honourable friend we'll continue to work with her and local leaders to make our streets safe.
Matthew.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituency of Melksham and Devizes does not have a minor injuries unit, leaving many to travel far afield to Bath or Swindon to access A&E services. Would the PM please meet with me to discuss the need for an expanded hospital provision in my constituency? Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank him for raising this on behalf of his constituents. I will make sure he gets the meeting with the relevant minister to talk through his particular concerns so that we can seek to address them.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. After 14 years of Conservative austerity, councils are finally getting the support they need to deliver for residents. In my constituency of Bolton South and Walkden, under the leadership of Councillor Nick Peel in Bolton and Mayor Paul Dennett in Salford, increased funding is being turned into restoring frontline services, investment in town centres and support for families. Does the Prime Minister agree that the councils need serious leadership and long-term funding certainty to deliver, not short-term protest politics that put services at risk? And will he commit to continuing that support?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for a question. Labour's boosting funding for councils that were chronically underfunded by the party opposite. I pay tribute to Labour councils delivering results for her community in stark contrast to the division and chaos we've seen from Reform councils wherever they've been elected.
Katie Lamb.
Tens of thousands of
people across Kent and Sussex were without running water last week. While the response of South East Water was shambolic, the Staplehurst Emergency Help Team got a bottled water supplier, set up a collection station and delivered water to vulnerable people. Using only volunteers, they supported local people, businesses, farms and care homes with 20,000 bottles of water. Does the Prime Minister think, as I do, that South East Water should be ashamed to be schooled in crisis response by the volunteers of the Staplehurst Emergency Help Team?
Yes.
And has he, like many of my constituents and many of our colleagues, lost confidence in South East Water's Chief Executive?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising. The situation is completely unacceptable, and we welcome Ofbot's investigation into the company. That is the right thing. The Environment Secretary met company bosses last week to stress the need for accountability, and ministers are continuing to chair daily meetings. But it is totally unacceptable and it needs to be fixed.
Lee Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For too long, many of my constituents in Corby and East Northamptonshire have not had access to good, secure, well-paid jobs. We made a commitment in our manifesto that we would change that. You can't grow an economy based on insecure work, where from one week to the next, somebody doesn't know how many hours they're going to work or how much money they'll be paid. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that all workers should have the hours that they actually work reflected in their contracts so that we can give all working people the security to plan their finances, the security to plan their lives and the security to build a future for themselves and their family?
Prime Minister.
I'm proud of this Labour government delivering the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. And we're ending exploitative zero-hour contracts, ending unscrupulous fire and rehire practices, plus parental leave and sick pay. And workers will benefit from those rights in April, Mr. Speaker, and they should never forget that Reform and the Tories opposed every single one of them.
Robert Jenrick.
Mr. Speaker, one of the last meetings that I took as Shadow Justice Secretary was with the parents of Lenny Scott. Lenny Scott was an exceptionally brave prison officer. He uncovered corruption in his prison. He left the service, and years later he was hunted down and brutally murdered. Because he died after leaving active service, there was never any compensation paid to the children that he left behind. I know the Prime Minister would want to right this wrong. I wrote to the Justice Secretary privately after I discovered this, and I should say his parents never asked for any support. Would the Prime Minister correct this, ensure that this brave man's children have the support that they need as they grow up without the father that they deserved, and join me in thanking all the brave men and women who serve us in our prison service?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this, and I will make sure that it is looked into as a matter of urgency, given the circumstances he's set out.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly welcome the government's decision to consult on introducing a social media ban for under-16s, something, Mr. Speaker, that the Tories didn't do in office, and they didn't even support until last week. But the average 12-year-old now spends 29 hours a week on a smartphone, whilst more than 500 children a day are being referred to mental health services for anxiety. These stats are not unrelated. Parents, teachers and members across these benches can see the damage that social media is doing to our young, developing minds every single day. Does the Prime Minister agree that the scale of harm demands swift action and that this consultation must lead to timely decisions?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is an issue of real concern to parents. As a father of two teenage children, I know just how much concern it is. That is why we will have a consultation to look at expert and international evidence to get this right, and we will respond by the summer. And that includes looking at the question of the age that children can access social media and restriction on addictive features. I'm also concerned, as is the Education Secretary, about the screen time used for those under the age of 5. So we'll look at all of those issues and make sure that Ofsted checks enforcement of bans during schools.
Mr. Speaker, the Bertie Arms is a fantastic family pub, but because of the Chancellor's tax raid on local business, they face a 2,000% increase in their business rates by 2029. That means the Treasury will lose £200,000 in tax take, and Uffington will lose the heart of its community. Now, the Prime Minister promised not to put up taxes on working people, so how does he justify a 2,000% tax attack on working family businesses like this pub?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, we're working with the sector to put in the necessary support, but I would remind her that 7,000 pubs closed on their watch, and she didn't say a word about it.
Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Norfolk is a dental desert causing real suffering for my constituents. I welcome government action so far, including 21,000 extra urgent emergency appointments. But we are the only region without a dental school. The University of East Anglia is ready to open one. So could the Prime Minister set out what more we will do as a government to tackle the dentistry crisis, and will he back our calls for a new dental school in our region?
Prime Minister.
Well, since day one, she's fought for her constituents on this issue, and I pay tribute to her in relation to that. I agree the University of East Anglia would be an excellent candidate for any additional funded dentistry places available in the future. Mr. Speaker, we're also reforming contracts and making sure dentists spend more time working in the NHS to ring thousands of extra appointments to fix the failure that we were left with.
Final question, Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children with disabilities and special educational needs in Somerset will be severely hit if the government goes ahead with removing the remoteness uplift from those authorities. Will the government commit to ensuring that those councils with the largest land area in the country, of which Somerset is one, are properly reimbursed for the cost of remoteness so that children in my Taunton and Wellington constituency do not suffer as a result?
Prime Minister.
Well, we do understand the challenges in rural communities, and we'll look at that as part of the work we're doing on reform.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Let the front benches change over. Point of order, Dr. Ellicott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understood that the purpose of Prime Minister's questions was for the Prime Minister to answer questions from MPs, and yet...
Hold on. I've not got the responsibility for the answers from the Prime Minister. I certainly don't want that responsibility. It is up to the Prime Minister if he answers that question. That's why I closed down. He is not there to ask questions of your party. I think we'll leave it at that. I'm not continuing the debate at this stage. Right, we now come to statements. Secretary of State, Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, I would like to make a statement about the Warm Homes Plan, which we published today. Mr. Speaker, this is a plan focused on the #1 issue facing our country, the cost of living crisis, and on the scourge of fuel poverty, which affects millions of families across Britain. Now, at the budget, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, took an average of £150 of costs off energy bills from April. This winter, we've expanded the warm home discount to a total of 6 million families, and today we allocate £15 billion in our warm homes plan. Mr. Speaker, a more than doubling of public investment in home upgrades compared to the last Parliament. In fact, the biggest public investment in home upgrades in British history to cut bills and tackle fuel poverty. And in making this investment, we turn the page on a lost decade of the last government's failure. Home insulation levels falling by more than 90% between 2010 and 2024. The promise of minimum energy efficiency standards for renters broken. The cancellation of the zero carbon home standard, and the repeated failures of schemes like the Green Deal, the Green Homes Grant and the Eco Scheme. And worst of all, Mr. Speaker, our dependence on fossil fuels, leaving us exposed to the worst energy bills crisis in generations. Mr. Speaker, the last government failed time after time. This government is doing the work to put it right. The starting point for this plan is that clean energy is not only the right choice for energy security and reducing emissions, but for cutting people's bills. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, the public agrees. They are showing record demand for technologies like solar, batteries and heat pumps that can save families hundreds of pounds a year. Heat pump sales in Britain have grown by around 50% annually, one of the fastest growing markets in Europe. Last year saw a record number of rooftop solar installations. And the driving purpose of this plan is to ensure those benefits are available not just to the wealthiest, but to families throughout our country at every level of income. The driving purpose of this Labour government to stand up for working people and tackle the affordability crisis. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me set out the measures we are announcing in our plan today. First, today we announced £5 billion of public investment to directly deliver home upgrades for low-income families. This will help families living in social housing and low-income owner-occupiers to have warmer homes and lower bills. In setting out this plan, we're abolishing the failed ECO scheme and making the principled decision that we should fund support through public investment, not levies on bills. And our plan, Madam Deputy Speaker, pays heed to all the evidence that says this funding is best delivered with local authorities and mayors in the driving seat. People, those representing local people, delivering for local people. And at the same time, we recognise the challenges facing suppliers who used to deliver ECO, so we'll ensure this extra money is used to help support them. And my right honourable friend, the Minister for Energy Consumers, will convene a working group of contractors, social housing providers and local authorities to oversee this work. Overall, this allocation to tackle fuel poverty is the biggest public investment in tackling fuel poverty in our nation's history. Second, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a scandal that 1.6 million children live in private accommodation suffering from cold, damp or mould, according to citizens' advice. We on this side believe in a simple principle. If you rent a home, private or social, your landlord has a responsibility to ensure it is safe, warm and affordable to heat. The last government, Madam Deputy Speaker, promised higher standards, and then they ripped up that promise. Today we deliver. By 2030, private landlords will have to upgrade their properties to meet minimum standards of energy efficiency, and we've consulted on similar rules in the social rented sector, tackling the scourge of poor quality rented homes and cutting bills for renters. And I can tell the House that these measures alone will lift over 500,000 families out of fuel poverty. Third, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is right we target help at those most in need. But we know the affordability crisis stretches well beyond those on low incomes. We want to make it easier for all households to cut their bills by choosing a heat pump, solar or batteries. So building on the steps we took at the budget to make electricity cheaper, we're expanding the boiler upgrade scheme, increasing investment every year out to 2030, with for the first time a universal offer of £2,500 for a heat battery or air-to-air heat pump, as well as £7,500 to install a conventional heat pump. But I want to go further. Currently, just 1 in 20 homes in Britain have solar panels installed on their rooftops. We are determined to unleash a rooftop revolution, helping many more families generate their own energy to cut their bills. So I can announce that the government is for the first time ever setting aside up to £2 billion to subsidise zero and low interest loans for solar panels, batteries and other technologies, learning from the successful experience of other countries and meeting the demand of people for this technology. And Madam Deputy Speaker, this is just the first step, with a further £3 billion available for loans and investments over the coming years through our Warm Homes Fund. Fourth, as we upgrade existing homes, we will ensure that new homes are built cheaper to run with solar and clean heating as standard. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is just common sense. People cannot understand why we are building new homes with higher bills. The reason is because they refused to act. We are putting an end to this absurd situation. We will publish the future home standards shortly, and for the first time, solar panels will be fitted as standard in new homes. And alongside the other measures I've set out, this is designed to help treble the number of homes with solar by the end of the decade. Fifth, to make these changes happen, we cannot go on with the old system of accountability and delivery that has frankly failed. A situation where people have to navigate a fragmented and confusing system of home upgrades delivered through a bewildering number of organisations and schemes. And we need to face up to the fact that after repeated failures of the last government to deliver schemes effectively, we need a specialist body with the technical expertise and focus required. So consolidating functions from Ofgem and other organisations and abolishing SALIX, and with no increase in arm's length bodies, we will establish a new warm homes agency. It will deliver impartial advice and guidance, work with local authorities and businesses, oversee government schemes, backed by a reformed system of consumer protection. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will put an end to the scandalous failure of accountability and regulation and the waste of the public's money we saw under the last government. Finally, we are determined to ensure this rollout delivers not just for consumers but workers too. We're the largest producers of gas boilers in Europe, and there's a huge opportunity to harness this expertise to produce heat pumps as well. Manufacturers are already embracing this opportunity, including Ideal Heating in Hull, Valent in Derbyshire, which I visited last year, and Copeland in Northern Ireland. But currently less than 40% of heat pumps sold in Britain are made in Britain. We're setting a new aim of at least 70% of heat pumps installed in the UK being made in the UK, backed by a trebling of public investment in heat pump manufacturing with £90 million set aside today. Overall, we expect the Warm Homes Plan to support up to 180,000 additional jobs in energy efficiency, heat pumps and heat networks by the end of the decade, creating opportunities for builders, electricians, plumbers and installers, as well as new workers entering the industry. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we will establish a new task force with the TUC, working with business, to ensure these jobs are well paid and highly skilled, with a proper role for trade unions. Because we are a Labour government, we expect the rights of working people to be at the heart of this industry's future. Madam Deputy Speaker, taken together, this is a landmark plan that stands in a great reforming tradition of Labour governments. After 1945 delivering on the promises of homes for the people, modernising the nation's housing stock under Harold Wilson in the 1960s, introducing the decent home standard for social housing in the 2000s. Each Labour government meeting the rightful expectations of working people that the next generation can expect higher standards of living than the last. That is what this government seeks to do in our time. A plan to cut bills for millions, help lift 1 million families out of fuel poverty, and create good jobs. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Secretary of State for advance copy of his statement today. Today's announcement is long overdue, an entire year to be exact. During the general election, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Labour Party claimed that they would cut household bills. This announcement should be part of that. Yet, in that time, since the general election and under this Secretary of State's watch, energy bills have not fallen, they have gone in the opposite direction. Energy bills are up by £200 since that election, partly as a result of the Secretary of State's own political choices. We believe there is a greater role in our energy system for home batteries. We support a more technology-agnostic approach to air-to-air heat pumps, and of course we believe rooftop solar is much better than carpeting the countryside in huge solar farms. But the Secretary of State is ignoring the core problem. We are in an electricity price crisis of this Secretary of State's own making. And even if we are as charitable as possible and accept that they reach 5 million households, as they say they will, benefit from this plan, then it does nothing to cut bills for 83% of the country. But those households will all pay much higher taxes because of Labour's budget, including to fund this Secretary of State's £15 billion plan. And those households are struggling with their energy bills now because of the choices of the Secretary of State. So, turning to the specific measures in the plan, his department's own figures show that the public is becoming more sceptical about heat pumps. Between winter 2024 and spring 2025, the share of people saying that they were unlikely to install an air source heat pump increased from 38% to 45%. And if you ask anyone why they don't want a heat pump, they will tell you it's the high upfront cost. Yes, but it's but it's also the high ongoing running costs, which often make them more expensive to run than a gas boiler. There is a serious risk that this government legally binding targets are forcing them to push people into buying heat pumps, but those families will all be locked into sky-high running costs because this government has a political target which is pushing up their electricity bills at the same time. Yet this plan does nothing to address those high ongoing running costs. Instead, last week, the government announced they are locking this country into higher energy prices for decades through the botched wind auction. Just imagine, Madam Deputy Speaker, if there was a plan on the table to cut the cost of running a heat pump by 20% instantly, a cheap power plan that wouldn't involve raising tax on working people to fund handouts, a plan that would axe the carbon tax and scrap the Secretary of State's rip-off wind subsidies to cut bills for every family in this country. Wouldn't that be a much better approach to make heat pumps much more attractive? Next, what steps will his department take to make sure the low-interest loans will provide good value for money? How many homes will benefit from the low and zero-interest loan scheme? And how will it be determined who gets a low-interest loan or a zero-interest loan? On the changes to the minimum energy efficiency standards for rented homes, he will know that the previous government did more than any other to improve energy efficiency standards, with half of all homes having an EPC rating of C or above when we left office, compared to 14% when the Secretary of State left office in 2010. But has his department carried out any impact assessment of what the 2030 deadline will cost landlords, and therefore how much will be passed on to renters in increased rents? His own government's data shows it will cost over £12,000 to upgrade a home from EPC E to C. £12,000 of that will then be passed on to families in increased rents. We cannot ignore all the cost that this government is imposing on the housing sector and the impact that they will have on the cost of living for families in this country. The government is going to set up a new quango, the Warm Homes Agency, to administer these schemes. So can the Secretary of State tell us how much this new quango will cost the taxpayer, how it will be held accountable, and why he decided to spend money setting up a new quango rather than have those functions delivered by his own department that he controls? And finally, the Secretary of State has already been forced by this House to ban Great British Energy from spending taxpayers' money on solar panels when there is evidence of forced labour in the supply chain. Of course, we welcome that. But can he assure the House that he will apply that same ban on slave labour to solar panel installations funded by the Warm Homes Plan? And when will he publish details of how that mechanism will work so that it can be scrutinised by this House? In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is ignoring that affordability crisis the Secretary of State talks about is a crisis of his own making. They are ignoring the fact that they are locking this country into paying higher bills for far longer. If they truly want to encourage people to adopt green technology like heat pumps or EVs, they need to make electricity cheap. That means they could adopt the Conservatives' cheap power plan to cut everyone's electricity bills by 20% and scrap this reckless Clean Power 2030 target, which is locking everyone into paying higher bills for far longer.
Mr. State.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always a pleasure to be opposite the honourable gentleman. Let me just make a few points to him, sort of in the gentlest way I can. Look, first of all, on the cost of electricity, the Chancellor in her budget did more in one decision, which was to transfer the 75% of the renewables obligation to public spending to cut electricity costs, than they did in 14 years in power. The second point is he's shouting about bills. Let me tell him the average bill in 2025 was lower in real terms than 2024, and so was the price cap, as he will know from the figures. And I am incredibly proud that this government, unlike the last government, is taking £150 of costs off bills, thanks to the Chancellor's decision, funded by taxes on the wealthy, and they oppose all of those taxes. And they oppose all of those tax measures. He talks about the renters issue. I mean, I think basically what I heard, which maybe shouldn't surprise me, is that he is actually against the higher standards for renters. He would leave renters, private renters, languishing in cold, damp homes, which is what they did in 14 years in power. We are proud of the decision we're making. I mean, actually, thanks to the brilliant work of my honourable friend, we've actually got a supportive quote from the landlords. I mean, even the landlords want more action than the Conservative Party when it comes to the renters. I mean, if just sort of to amuse the House briefly, you know, I'll even read it out. Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of the NRL. A clear roadmap for the reform of PRS is welcome. So even the landlords are more on the side of renters than the Conservative Party. He asks, why are we setting up the Warm Homes Agency? I'll tell him why. He says, you know, wouldn't it be better to do it within government? because they presided over a scandalous and shocking disaster in the eco scheme, a mess we are having to clear up. And actually, we are going to reform the system so that we have a proper agency with proper technical expertise to make sure nothing like what they visited on thousands of families across the country ever happens again. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I like the honourable gentleman, and I feel a bit of sympathy for him, because he has nothing to say about this issue. Let's just be honest about this. They failed over 14 years, and we're delivering.
Select Committee Chair Bill Esserson.
Can I congratulate the Secretary of State very warmly on the Warm Homes plan, not least the universal nature of the offer, from support for people in fuel poverty through health co-benefits in addressing cold, damp and mould, to the availability of cheap finance so everybody can take part in the technical solutions available. The eco scheme, which failed so badly, has left a legacy, and can I encourage him to address the concerns among consumers, amongst industry and amongst the workforce, and also not to lose sight of the benefits in reduced bills through insulation, particularly loft insulation. On the subject of cheaper bills, the Select Committee has heard again and again that in particular with the Warm Homes Plan, if people are to benefit to the maximum extent from it, we have to see reductions in the price of electricity and a reduction in the gap between the price of electricity and the price of gas. There are welcome measures. He mentioned them in his statement, the £150 off coming in April being a very, very good start. But can he confirm that more action will be taken on bringing down the cost of electricity so as many people as possible can benefit from the Warm Homes Plan to the maximum extent?
Let me address the questions that my honourable friend asked, and he speaks with great knowledge on these issues. Look, first of all, on the eco scheme, I think he was making reference partly to the installers, and it is important to emphasise the point I made in my statement, which is we want the extra money, which is £1.5 billion allocated at the budget, to help those installers because they are going to face a difficult transition. And I think he raises an important issue. On the cost of electricity, as I said in reply to the opposition spokesperson, the measures that my right honourable friend the Chancellor took in the budget are important for cutting the cost of electricity. And all of the evidence I've seen says you can get with the right tariff, running a heat pump is cheaper than running a boiler. Obviously, we continue to look at whether there are other ways we can bring the cost of electricity down, and my honourable friend is right about that. And just on his point about insulation, I think my maxim here, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the measures that will cut bills the most are what matters to me. I'm not sort of ideological about this, whether it's insulation or heat pumps or batteries or solar, whatever it is that can give us most bang for our buck in bringing down bills.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Pippa Halings with 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we've been asking for the Warm Homes Plan for Christmas for the past 2 years, so it's very better late than never. Unwrapping it got some mixed feelings. You know, the Liberal Democrats have long called for an emergency home energy upgrade scheme with free insulation and heat pumps, and recently also proposals for low-interest loan schemes like these. So we really, really welcome this significant investment by the government in low-carbon heating. And it's folly for anyone to think that we can rely on Putin's Russia or Trump's America for the gas to heat our homes. So it's right for the government to help households make this shift. Every solar panel, heat pump and battery install will protect families from volatile costs of fossil fuels and make homes cheaper to both warm and cool, which is a key point too. However, I have to say I do share the concerns of the energy efficiency sector about the balance that is being struck between insulation and electrification. We've seen, as the Secretary of State has said, fuel poverty rise and rates of insulation fall over the last 5 years. And the UK has some of the least energy efficient housing in Europe, leading to serious health problems with cold, damp, Dickensian home conditions. Despite our warnings, there's still no clarity in this plan about what will replace the ECO programme, leaving supply chains in limbo and skilled installers going bankrupt. And this delay, I call this out, could leave us without an operational national fuel poverty strategy over this coming winter. We hope not, and will therefore hold the government to account on this and other things that have been mentioned that are, we need to hold you to account on this as being delayed. The gas and electricity price reform postponed again. Efficiency standards have been weakened for landlords. And whilst we encourage, thank you so much for taking on board the rooftop revolution on the back of Max Wilkinson's solar bill, but the future home standard is still missing in action. We can't afford more values. We welcome this significant investment. There is no time to waste. Thank you, Madam President.
I welcome the thanks, but obviously it's not down to me, but to the Minister. So we must stop using the word you, Secretary of State.
Well, look, I'm always glad to deliver the Liberal Democrats a late Christmas present, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agreed with some of the Honourable Lady's point, particularly about our dependence on fossil fuels and why clean energy is the way forward to give us energy security and sovereignty in a dangerous world. I want to reassure her on insulation. As I said to my honourable friend, we continue to see a really, really important role for insulation, but I hope she will agree and members of the House will agree that what matters as we invest public money is what is going to do most to tackle the affordability crisis, and that is our test. So absolutely insulation is a key part of that. On the eco-supply chain, just to expand a little bit on what I said earlier to my honourable friend, look, we do recognise, and I know this from my own personal conversations, the issues facing organisations in the supply chain, and that's why in the £1.5 billion extra, which was on top of the 13 billion or so previously allocated in the Warm Homes Plan, we're going to make sure that £1.5 billion is spent through the eco installers to help them make this transition to the new system. My honourable friend is getting to work straight away on a group representing the installers, the local authorities, who are obviously going to be responsible for the procurement and the spending, because we want to do everything we can to help the supply chain.
Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really pleased to see this Warm Homes Plan, as a warm home for everyone was one of my key election pledges. And in my constituency of Morecambe and Lunesdale, Green Rose CIC has been helping people for years with energy efficiency and making their homes warmer. So can the Secretary of State tell me how local experts like Green Rose CIC will be used to deliver this change for our constituents?
Well, I think my honourable friend asked a really, really important question, and I congratulate Green Rose CIC for the work that they do. We absolutely see organisations like that as central to this plan, working with local authorities, working to give local people advice, also working, and I don't know whether this applies to Green Rose CIC, on our local power plan, which will come out soon, to give opportunities for local community energy schemes as well, because community ownership is a big part of it. I see organisations like that, and it really reflects the enthusiasm on the ground as crucial to this plan.
Harriet Cross.
Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend and the Shadow Minister asked, and the Secretary of State did not manage to answer, about whether or not Chinese supply chains, slave labour supply chains, will be involved in the procurement of any aspect or any part of the solar panels involved in this scheme. Please, can the Shadow State confirm that not a single aspect of this project will come off the back of slave labour and their supply chains?
Well, I have to say to the Honourable Lady, we inherited from them I'll get to the question, to the system, and we have raised the standards. We've raised the standards in the solar roadmap. Through the SSI initiative with the solar industry. We've raised the standards through GB Energy, and my honourable friend, the Minister for Energy, is working with colleagues across government to ensure that slave labour is not used in the supply chain.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend for this Warm Homes Plan. It has been a long time coming, but maybe perhaps a little longer than the members of the opposition are prepared to admit, since I know he and I worked on something very similar way before the Tories then left and abandoned the Warm Homes ambitions that we now see fully fulfilled. 1 in 6 of the households in my constituency live in the current calculation of fuel poverty, predominantly in places like Cliftonville and Ramsgate Town Centre, where incomes are low and buildings are old. Also, incidentally, they tend to be predominantly privately rented. Would my right honourable friend consider revising the fuel poverty calculation to really reflect the truth of how many people struggle to keep their homes warm in winter and cool in summer? Will he also confirm a little bit more about the information that might be available to support the landlords to make this shift, since it actually requires 28% of my residents actually live in private rented accommodation. Will he confirm that he will support an energy social tariff to support the transition to a cheaper and cleaner form of energy in the later?
I think my honourable friend is right about this. Working with the private rented sector to raise the standards is incredibly important, and frankly we can't let the scandalous situation that affects so many private tenants carry on. I think she also makes another important point though. We know this is a big journey of upgrading the nation's housing stock. There's a very, very long and bad legacy that we've been left. We are determined to make a difference to it.
Mr Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Orkney and Shetland are home to some of the worst levels of fuel poverty anywhere in the United Kingdom, as well as some of the largest onshore wind farms in the country. Solar panels are of limited usefulness to us because it's coldest in the winter, and in the depths of winter we might have as little as 5 hours daylight in the day. What would make a difference to us is meaningful support for community benefit or even community ownership of some of the installed wind farms that we have in the Isles, or an Isles tariff for communities like ours and in the Western Isles. When will we hear something from the Secretary of State on these ideas?
We'll shortly. I thank him for his question, really important question. We're going to shortly publish our local power plan, which is precisely about community ownership that he was talking about. We see that as having a central role. If you look at countries like Germany and Denmark, it plays much more of a role than here. We want to expand it, and we want his constituents to benefit.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was interesting to hear the Liberal Democrats really struggling to say that they admire this policy, given that they seem to be getting everything that they want from it. And it's also disappointing to see the deserted Conservative benches for this. I offer my apologies to the shadow spokesperson, who is not with allies. But it's disappointing to hear the Conservatives move from being climate change converts to being sustainability sceptics yet again. The Conservatives left our country vulnerable to the energy price spikes, which made the last government have to spend at least £78 billion to deal with the cost of living crisis, whereas this government is investing big, and we've got Europe's biggest ever wind auction announced last week. Now we're seeing clean power from day one, new builds, new power. Does the Secretary of State agree that a major motive for this plan is to cut hundreds of pounds off bills in Bournemouth East, to go solar by standard, and that only a rooftop revolution will help bring down bills but keep bills down in the long term?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I guess the honourable gentleman on the other side will be wondering where his friends have gone and whether they're going to another political party. Let me say to him, this is absolutely about his constituents. It's absolutely about cutting bills. This is a long-term affordability crisis, and this is a long-term plan to help tackle it.
I have confidence that the Secretary of State is across his brief and doesn't need to be warmed up before a question. So get straight to the question so we can get on to the next member. Graham Ledbetter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the additional investment in energy efficiency measures. It's a good thing. And I certainly welcome the simplification of the energy efficiency systems that people can bid into, and that can only be a good thing for consumers. It's been a veritable maze. However, the biggest barrier for many of my constituents and people across Scotland is price. They cannot invest in their home if they cannot get a decent price for their energy and deal with the cost of living that is affecting them right now, in this moment, with the bills that they're getting on their doorstep right now. The North of Scotland has the highest energy prices in the UK. The SNP has put forward proposals for a social tariff. Will the Secretary of State seriously consider those measures and put in place a social tariff to enable people to take advantage of these schemes?
I'd say thanks the honourable gentleman for his question. Just to respond, it's because we recognise the immediacy of the affordability crisis that we took the action we did in the budget, take £150 of costs off bills. It's because we recognise the affordability crisis that we significantly increased the numbers eligible for the warm home discount, which I think is hundreds of thousands more people in Scotland now eligible. I would point out that the Scottish Government has some responsibility here, having cut some of their own schemes in this, but we want to work with the Scottish Government and do all we can to help the honourable gentleman's constituents.
Thank
you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend has once again pulled quite a rabbit out of the Chancellor's hat, so I congratulate him. He's clearly her favourite Secretary of State. But does he agree with me that we know what happens when we don't rely on renewables? It's the £44 billion that the previous government had to pay to subsidise bills at the same time that our constituents were struggling to pay them. I agree with what my colleague, the chair of the Designated Select Committee, said about we still need to be driving down those electricity costs. But will the Secretary of State tell us, in terms of the skill shortages that we have within the heat pump installation sector, what does he think are the key things we can do to address them, and how many heat pumps should we expect to be installed by 2030?
Secretary of State.
On 2030, 450,000 is the target we set out in this plan. On his point about skills, our skills task force is absolutely designed to do what my honourable friend said, which is to meet the skills needs, the very significant skills needs we are going to have. And I think, just to the first part of my honourable friend's question, I do think the Chancellor deserves real credit for this, because she recognised the importance of long-term public investment, which the last government singularly did not. The easy thing in difficult times is to cut public investment. She didn't do that. She's increased it, and she's investing in this area very significantly.
Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I warmly welcome this plan and the ambition that the government is showing and try and dispel some of the misconceptions on the opposition benches. I'm sure we've all been out knocking on doors in our constituencies, as I was last week in Worcester Park in my constituency. And a lady came to the door in a big jacket, and I kind of let her pass because I thought she was on away, but she wasn't, because she was in her home in a jacket because she didn't have the heating on, and I'm sure we've all experienced that. So we know how the cost of living crisis is hitting our residents, whether it's in grocery bills, whether it's in the rent, or whether it's in energy costs. Can the Minister give a bit more detail on how we're going to address those energy costs and insulation in the short term, whether there are programmes in here that can be funded for those easy wins, that we can see those leaks and those energy from existing gas boilers come down, whilst the industry spools up by getting the skills to install heat pumps, and we get the production lines in progress.
State.
I think what the honourable gentleman said at the beginning of his question is something that will resonate with every member of this House, because it's what so many people are facing, and it's a chronic and an acute cost of living crisis. It's been going on a very, very long time, and that's what makes it really hard for people. On his point about what difference we can make in the short term, that's why the £150 is important, because immediate relief is important. That's why the warm home discount is important and its expansion. And also, you know, I do encourage people watching this and members to encourage their constituents to go to the gov.uk website. People can get to their local authorities, see what schemes are available. There is money available, and we do want to get as much help out as quickly as possible to people. Sometimes this money gets underspent, actually, by local authorities. We want this money to get out and help people.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder where all the Tory MPs are. They can't all be having cosy chats with Robert Jenrick.
Roast dinner.
Can I welcome this...
We do not reference members by their names, but by their constituencies. Get straight to the questions.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do apologise. I welcome the Warm Homes plan, not only the support it will give for the most in-need constituents in Bracknell Forest, but actually the support for everyone to make important upgrades to their home, including with low and no interest loans for solar panel upgrades. Can I ask my right and honourable friend what thoughts he's given to supporting leaseholders to make sure that they are able to make these changes and aren't held back by freeholders turning down sensible and common sense requests?
Absolutely, we see leaseholders as being eligible for this help. It's very, very important that they are. And I think my honourable friend speaks very compellingly about this issue with his constituency experience. We want as many people as possible to be helped as quickly as possible with this plan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite the fact that these plans will not apply to Northern Ireland, I do welcome the aspect of the plans which apply to rented accommodation. Maybe the Minister could confirm whether or not there will be a Barnett consequential for Northern Ireland. But does he recognise that even with these plans, there will still be an upfront cost which will require low-income families to borrow, and that will be an impediment? And secondly, the running costs will still be higher despite what he has done in electricity prices, because that's been offset by the cost of his net zero policies, which cause electricity to be dearer than gas.
I thought for the first time in 20 years we were going to agree completely, but we nearly got there. 3/4 agreement is better than we've done in 20 years. Look, on the first part of what he says, look, we recognise that there are Barnett consequentials have already been allocated for this, and we would encourage, obviously it's for the decision for the government of Northern Ireland to make their own, the executive to make their own decisions on how they spend their money. We do want the Warm Homes Agency to work with people, with devolved governments as well. And we also want to look at how zero and low interest loan scheme can work across the United Kingdom too. So we want to work as much as possible with devolved governments to help people across the UK.
Anderson.
I particularly welcome the new requirements placed on private landlords, which would be a huge boost to tenants in the Buckingham and Bletchley constituency. My question concerns rural communities who often face high energy costs and other practical barriers, such as the limited availability of those who would install things like heat pumps. So can he set out a bit more detail about how he will be working, his department will be working with relevant local authorities and suppliers to ensure that rural communities like those in North Buckinghamshire aren't left behind?
Secretary of State.
I think my honourable friend asked a really important question, and I want to sort of tell him a nerdy fact, which is, I like nerdy facts. It's in character. Nearly half of the people who've got the boiler upgrade scheme are actually in rural areas, and I think I'm right in saying that 1/3 are off the gas grid. And so I think this tells you something actually about the kind of appetite there is, particularly in rural communities and particularly those off the gas grid, to find alternatives. And so hopefully the continuation and indeed expansion of these schemes will help his constituents.
Dr. Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the publication of the long-awaited Warm Homes Plan. The Green Party has tirelessly campaigned for many of the things in here, a more consistent, nationwide, clearer, straightforward system for people to access support, better inspection and accountability for installers, and of course, solar panels as default on roofs. However, 2 questions for the Secretary of State. First of all, this is supposed to be a warm homes plan, but there's a lot of focus on energy supply improvements and less than I would expect on energy demand management, insulation, which is crucial to reducing bills. Why is that? And secondly, the scale of this plan is still nowhere close to the need. 2.7 million households in fuel poverty, according to the government's own statistics, 6 million households, according to other statistics. This plan aims to address 1 million of those households only. It's a 25% cut on the previous amount promised for this work. Why is that, and what will the government do to reach those millions of additional households who won't be...
I'm sort of half thank her for her question. Look, on the second question, look, I have to say, by anyone's reckoning, this is a very substantial investment. I mean, it's multiple times more than was done in the last Parliament, and I think there does need to be recognition of that. I will say to the Honourable Lady, I recognise that there is further to go. This is going to help 5 million homes, and there are a lot more homes that we also want to help, but I think it is, by anyone's measure, making a difference. I just want to go on to her first point, because I want to sort of reassure her on this point. You know, we absolutely see the value of fabric and insulation as part of this agenda, but I think the focus has got to be what works to cut bills, because that's what our constituents want us to focus on.
Rachel Hopkins.
And I too warmly welcome the Warm Homes Plan, which will benefit families in Luton South and South Bedfordshire, especially the measures targeted at low-income families to help lift them out of fuel poverty. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that after a decade of failure from the party opposite, it is this Labour government that recognises the cost of living crisis and is taking definitive action through this record public investment in home upgrades to help reduce bills for good?
I think my honourable friend puts it very well. We are turning the page on a decade of failure. And look, I think it's really, really important that the public know that we get the scale of the crisis that they are facing, this long-term crisis which this government came into office and is determined to deal with. And we're not over-claiming on this plan, but it will make a difference. And what we are about is making a difference to people in the cost that they face so that we can help tackle the cost of living crisis.
Helen Morgan.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State has already pointed out, in rural areas we tend to have an older housing stock, lots of people off-grid, and they are very keen to see upgrades made to their home, and we welcome this announcement. In my constituency, a number of people engaged with the Eco4 scheme, and unfortunately they have been let down badly by rogue installers who've left their bills higher, their homes damaged, and who have taken money from the taxpayer. Can the Secretary of State describe to me what he's doing to ensure that that doesn't happen again this time, and also what remedy might be available for those people who have been let down by those rogue actors under Eco4?
Secretary of State.
Well, look, any cases, and I do say this to the honourable lady, should be brought to the attention of my honourable friend, because, you know, I feel a deep sense of sympathy for the people who've been badly affected by Eco4, by the problems in Eco4, and it's obviously something that was brought to our attention when we came to office, and we are determined to have remediation for all of the people affected. I think that has got to be the fundamental principle here, that people through no fault of their own have been badly let down by the system, and they deserve to have that made good for them. On her point about how do we stop it happening in the future, I mean, I'd say a couple of things. First of all, our experience is that local authority schemes had many fewer problems and had much higher standards of safeguards. And secondly, the point of the Warm Homes Agency is to have a proper system of regulation which government oversees. I mean, that is the fundamental principle here. We had a piecemeal, privatised, fragmented system, and that is partly what led to the problems. We can't allow that to continue.
Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I wholeheartedly welcome this announcement from the Secretary of State, and also welcome his work over many years in this very important policy area. This is an enormous issue in my constituency, with many older houses, many people struggling to pay their bills. So I wholeheartedly welcome it. I wondered if he might say a little bit also about the very important work that many local authorities are doing. In my area, Reading Borough Council, the Labour-run council, has invested heavily in new council houses, and shortly is due to open 300 new council houses built to a very high standard to ensure that people live in warm homes and have secure family finances with lower heating bills.
State.
I think my honourable friend raised a really important point. I was with all the mayors on Monday, talking to them about their role in relation to the Warm Homes Plan. And look, whether it's local authorities or whether it's regional mayors, they have the best sense about what their areas need, and they are the people to help coordinate and make this happen. And the truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, you know, in reality, lots of people have rightly said we need to do more, you know, that this is good, but could we go further? This is going to be a 15, 20-year project for the country. You know, and I think that is the way to think about this, which is this is a national mission to transform our housing stock. It's long overdue. We're making a really, really important start, and there will be further to go.
Lisa Roberts.
And there is much to welcome with the Warm Homes Plan. Wales, of course, has the oldest housing stock in Europe, with around a third of houses built before 1919. Because of this, Wales is rightly a net beneficiary of eco schemes, with 6% of all eco measures and 12% of eco4, and he'll recognise that this is higher than the Barnett consequential funding based on population share. So can he explain how the Warm Homes funding for Wales will be sufficient to meet the extreme challenges facing Welsh homeowners?
Well, look, clearly, you know, this scheme is really, really important for Wales and for the impact. Just if you take the boiler upgrade scheme, for example, and we are determined to work with the Welsh Government to make sure that this really makes a difference for people in Wales, and that is the work that my honourable friend is doing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome this £15 billion investment to tackle energy security and make sure that family finances are protected from fossil fuel price spikes. There is a fantastic organisation in my constituency, co-founded by a lady called Jane, called Women in Retrofit, which focuses on getting more women and more girls into the retrofit industry. We simply won't be able to meet these targets without using that part of the workforce. So can I ask the Secretary of State what he has considered around getting more women and girls into this work?
I congratulate Jane. I congratulate women in retrofit. I think they sound like ideal people for my honourable friend's task force to talk to. I think my honourable friend makes such a powerful point about the diversity of opportunities there are here, and we want as many people as possible to take advantage of them.
Edward Morello.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the co-chair of the APPG on net zero, I want to welcome the expansion of the funding for solar and for heat pumps. As somebody who, prior to coming to this place, spent the better part of a decade riding the solar coaster, I know for a fact that the biggest drag on the run out of solar and expansion of solar is the skills shortage. So I just wonder if the Secretary of State would fill us in on what the government plans to do and what other departments will be doing in order to ensure that the skills are there for these installations to go ahead.
State.
Well, Honourable Gentleman makes a really important point. The solar roadmap set out some of the work that we're doing, but the whole point of the task force, and I think this is a much more intentional way of thinking about the workforce challenges compared to the previous government, is to make sure that we do have the workforce in place. The fact that we saw over 200,000 installations last year does show the level of demand for rooftop solar. When you think about some of the eco organisations that are sort of struggling with the transition, they could be part of this, but we want to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I'm really pleased to see this plan. It's such a welcome change from the lukewarm gusts of hot air that have come from the opposition when they were in government. It's practical, it's pragmatic, and it's deliverable. Lots of people in my constituency will welcome how fair it is as well, particularly for people on lower incomes, but middle incomes, house owners, renters, everyone. But the worry for people in my constituency is going to be that we have a local authority in Kent County Council that is committed to climate denialism. They're obsessed with it. And how can people in my constituency of Sittingbourne and Sheppey get the advantages for their houses, for their jobs, for their employment, for the tradespeople that really want to be part of this?
State.
I think my honourable friend makes a really important point, and I would say to the council that he talks about, leave your dogma at the door and help local people. Work with us to help local people.
Bob Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Labour-run Kirklees Council failed to apply for the first round of government Warm Homes local grants last year. In a cost of living crisis, this is an unforgivable abdication of duty and a total failure by Labour councillors, resulting in a loss of between £1.5 to £7 million that was secured by neighbouring authorities. I do welcome the government's Warm Homes plan, but my question to the Secretary of State is, will he confirm that the cost of this Warm Homes plan will not be added to monthly household bills across the country? And will he ensure that, unlike under the previous government, where my constituents were left with incomplete and dangerous and ineffective installations that they had to pay thousands to remove, that they will not be faced with the same issue?
I mean, first of all, it sounds like negative propaganda against Kirklees Council, which I'm sceptical about. But secondly, on the wider issue, I would say that the whole point of this is we're doing this through public investment, and that's the decision the Chancellor took, and I think it's the right decision.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really welcome the announcement today. Stoke-on-Trent is routinely ranked as #1 in the country for fuel poverty. We have old terrace housing, often with single glaze and small yards, so spacing for heat pumps and these things is a concern, but I'm sure we'll work that out. We are very fortunate that Fiona Miller and the Beat the Coal team, who have met recently with the Minister for Consumer Energy, does a lot of work on the ground. So can I ask the Secretary of State, he says this will be run through local authorities. Where we have good partnerships on the ground in localities already doing the work, how can they be involved in this programme? And he also says that he is aware of the challenges that the suppliers of the Eco Grant face for having lost those contracts. In my constituency of Stoke-on-Trent, that's lots of jobs that have been lost now. How soon will the information be available to them so they can start workforce planning for the delivery of this programme so they can get people back into work delivering the upgrades we need?
On his first point about the partnerships, we want to use local partnerships that are already in place. On the point about the eco installers, that's the work that my honourable friend, the Minister, will be cracking on with. The reason why we didn't want to just say we're going to allocate the money and it needs to go through the eco installers is we want to make sure it happens, and we will urgently work on that.
questions need to be much shorter, as do the answers from the Secretary of State. Chagos Islands.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and welcome much of it, including the fact that he recognises the challenging facing suppliers and the fact that it's going to support 180,000 jobs. But can I ask, will the government commit to working with small local businesses, helping the local economy, or to deliver this scheme, or will it be just for the big boys?
SMEs will be crucial to this scheme.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With cost of living the #1 issue for my constituents in Basingstoke, I welcome this record investment in warmer homes and lower bills. Measures like zero and low interest loans for solar batteries and heat pumps, greater protections for renters and solar on new homes are all measures that will make a huge amount of difference. But can I ask the Secretary of State when my constituents will be able to begin applying for those low and zero interest loans, because for many of them there is no time to wait.
Yeah. Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point, and we're going to be working urgently with the banks and others. Indeed, I think there's a roundtable being convened next week to work out how quickly we can get on with this process. We want to do this as soon as possible. It will take time, and if there's one lesson from the past, it's we need to get this right, because we don't want a Green Deal and all of that malarkey happening. So we want to get it right, but we do want to do it as quickly as we can.
State. Speaker. I particularly welcome the investment in the low-cost loans for solar panels. It's really going to boost jobs. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the grid is not currently resilient enough to cope when our EV cars are providing microgeneration and, as a raise, get more efficient and hit the target for DNO approval. So what assurance does the Warm Homes Plan provide about investment in the grid and the capacity of DNOs so the revolution is successful and not a failed bright idea?
Well, look, we're doing big investment in the transmission infrastructure, and I would really urge all honourable members locally to be supporting that, not opposing it. And we're also doing this big reordering of the grid queue, which is crucial because that means that you then get the projects in the places that you need them.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome this significant investment. My constituents were badly let down by the previous faulty cavity wall insulation scheme and then were chased for adverse legal costs. So ensuring confidence in future schemes will be really important. Can I ask how we're supporting those really good suppliers under the ECO scheme and how quickly that transition will be in place in supporting them?
I think my honourable friend makes a really important point about the fragility of consumer confidence. You've got to support it. And really the point of this oversight group that my honourable friend will chair is to make sure we do as much as we can to support those good eco-suppliers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the new minimum energy efficiency standards for privately rented homes in the long-awaited Warm Homes Plan. But could the Secretary of State lay out how he's going to ensure that landlords don't simply pass on the costs of meeting those standards to renters? Could he perhaps ask his colleague, the Housing Secretary, to introduce rent controls in order to make sure that renters can afford to actually rent these new warm homes?
Dave?
I'm not going to do that, but what I will say to her is that, look, lots of landlords already meet these standards, first point. Secondly, we do want to provide some help to landlords to make this happen. And I think that this is an important point. You know, some of the schemes we've been talking about will be available to landlords. So through a combination of the fact that some landlords are already doing it and this help, we're confident that this will actually reduce costs and won't lead to higher rents.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the Secretary of State will agree it's not just about having the right policy, which I'm sure this is, but also having the right implementation. My constituents, Mr and Mrs Henry Smith, had a heat pump installed under a previous government scheme. The heat pump was so badly installed by Greener Living that the installer had to offer a backup gas boiler to get the home hot enough. Greener Living went bust. So will the Secretary of State now give an assurance that in future, under his schemes, there will be an assurance to anyone having an installation done, it will be done by competent companies, and that if it does go wrong, the government will stand behind people in making sure rectification work is done to a proper standard?
Absolutely, yes. I'm so sorry to hear about the experience of his constituents, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've got to make sure that we don't let this kind of thing happen.
Manuela Pettigala.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of Stratford-on-Avon, there are hundreds of residential park homes which are occupied by elderly residents, and these are very energy-inefficient homes and very complex to retrofit. And previous home upgrade grants were quite ineffective and bureaucratic because of the batching application for process of ready to retrofit homes. So they didn't reach many park homes. So will the Secretary of State ensure that the Warm Homes Plan will effectively deliver also for park homes residents?
As a constituency MP with park homes in my constituency, I'm very, very sympathetic to the issues facing people who live in park homes. I think in order to give her a proper answer, why don't we take that away? And I'm going to pass that on to my honourable friend.
Abdullah Mohammed. Speaker, I too warmly welcome this plan and the investment that's coming with this, and strongly commend the leadership of the Secretary of State on this particular area. It's great news that small businesses are the vehicle that will drive home the upgrade in our local communities, but they too have struggled. I've got over 5,000 small businesses in Sheffield Central. So can the Secretary of State outline how small businesses in Sheffield Central will benefit from this plan?
Well, I think my honourable friend is right about this. They are eligible for the boiler upgrade scheme, and there's substantial investment in that. We want them to benefit from the solar loans as well, and we also want, through the procurement through local authorities, to help them too. I think she's really right about this is the massive job creation opportunity, but we do need the SME sector to get its fair share.
Amanda Martin.
I too congratulate my right honourable friend on a deliverable warmer homes plan. On Friday I'm hosting a utility cost of living event with energy and water suppliers and banks because Portsmouth North residents were let down dramatically by the last government. Does the Secretary of State agree that home upgrades are one of the most effective ways to bring down energy bills, particularly for families where we've got 5,000 households in Portsmouth North officially living in fuel poverty and more struggling with energy costs because of prefabs, Victorian or older buildings mean less efficient heating?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend on convening people locally on the crucial issue of the cost of living crisis, and I'm sure that will be really effective and important event that she is hosting. And she is absolutely right. Home upgrades for her constituents in Portsmouth North and elsewhere are absolutely the long-term answer to the cost of living crisis.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I certainly welcome this statement to the House, especially that this scheme will now ensure there's a degree of localisation and devolution in terms of decision-making, and will hopefully get rid of the problems that we saw in the last government scheme. In Birmingham Perry-Barr, we have thousands of residents which have fallen victim to substandard work. So can I ask the Secretary of State, he's mentioned that there will be remediation. Will this remediation allow them to apply for this new scheme?
State.
Well, look, I think the remediation of the previous work should happen sort of whatever. It shouldn't require them to have to apply. There should be a process with Trustmark, who are the overseers, I think, in the case that he's talking about. But look, this is something that my department is very, very focused on. It would have been much better if this mess had not been created in the first place, but we're determined to clean it up. And if he has areas where it's not being cleaned up, please do them draw them to my attention of my honourable friend.
Jonathan Brash.
Deputy Speaker, 15% of Hartlepool constituents live in fuel poverty. Many more go without in order to pay the outrageous energy bills that they face, with many vulnerable children and elderly people living in properties that are too cold and too damp. That's not acceptable to me, and I know it's not acceptable to the Secretary of State. So can he say a little bit more about how we ensure that the welcome measures in this plan reach the most vulnerable people in communities like Hartlepool and beyond?
State.
My honourable friend speaks incredibly eloquently, and I'm sure it will resonate with people right across this House when they think about their constituents who are poor and vulnerable and facing a choice between heating and eating. I think the key thing here is to get this money out to local authorities and indeed combined authorities who are the best people to deliver this. Because I think that is repeatedly, if you look back over the previous years, that is the experience, and that is the way to get the help most urgently to people.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his statement. That really is good news, and we all welcome the Warm Homes Plan and help for families. However, I have some concerns, and I want to ask the Secretary of State if I can ask him, please. Can the Secretary of State outline how the devolved nations, I know the Barnett Consequential has been confirmed, that's good news, but the Executive will be the administrative body in Northern Ireland. So how will they administer the access and to deliver the scheme? And also, how will the so-called, I ask this question very, very gently, the so-called squeezed middle-class families, middle-income families who are highly taxed due to fiscal drag, obtain help for insulation? For the middle class, for those squeezed middle class who struggle to heat and pay their mortgage-owned homes. Thank you.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his important question, and I can tell him that the Minister met the Minister for Communities in the Northern Ireland Executive yesterday to talk about how we can work together, for example, on the Warm Homes Agency, which is UK-wide, hopefully on the solar loans as well. We want to do absolutely everything we can to work with the Northern Ireland Executive to help serve the people of Northern Ireland.
Jonathan Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the publication of this £15 billion Warm Homes Plan, which is going to get people's bills down and reduce our impact on the environment. But I was particularly interested to hear in the £90 million, which has been set aside for the development of heat pumps, because Valent, one of the world's leading manufacturers of heat pumps, is based in Belper in my constituency. So I'm going to ask him what steps is he taking to ensure that £90 million is spent well? Will he engage with Valent to make sure that we can draw upon their experience, and can we use that money to create more good jobs in this very important sector in Derbyshire?
Yeah, we love Valent and what they do. My honourable friend loves it so much she's going tomorrow to visit. It's part of the 90 million heat pump investment accelerator programme, and it is absolutely about working with companies like Valent so we can get domestic manufacturing in this country, which I'm sure is shared right across the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome the statement by the Secretary of State today. I had a visit from Citizens Advice Harlow yesterday, and they told me what we probably already know, that the #1 issue facing residents in Harlow is damp, mould and fuel poverty. My homes in Harlow weren't built in 1919 because Harlow didn't exist in 1919, but there's a unique problem that new towns do have, that they were all built at the same time, sometimes quickly after the war. So actually they're suffering from these problems at the same time. So I can ask the Secretary of State to take the new town challenge into consideration, and can he detail how this will make a huge difference for residents in my constituency of Harlow? Sorry.
My honourable friend speaks about a really important issue, and I was conscious of this from other experiences of visits that I've made. I think my honourable friend, the Minister, heard his statement. I think we do need to think about this, because there are areas like Harlow and elsewhere where they have particular challenges.
Thank you,
Madam Deputy Speaker, there are 44,000 homes in York which are energy insecure, so we'll really welcome today's announcement. However, that is talking about scale, and scaling the skills is really important. So can the Secretary of State say how he's working with the Education Secretary, ensuring further education has the resources it needs to scale the workforce for the future?
My honourable friend speaks with typical eloquence on these issues. This came up at the Mayor's meeting on Monday, and about how we ensure that particularly the FE sector is geared up to help train people for these opportunities. It's something absolutely we'll work with Skills England and the mayors on, and it's something that my honourable friend will be taking forward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State will recall a visit to Derby where he officially opened Valiant's heat source cylinder facility. Could he outline what today's announcement will mean to build on this, creating more clean energy jobs in Derby and across the UK?
Well, I very much enjoyed the visit to Valent, and it was incredibly impressed by what they were doing. And programmes like the Heat Pump Investment Accelerator are absolutely designed, as I said earlier, to help companies like Valent to capitalise on this growing market.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too welcome the warm home plans to lower constituents' heating bills and for the biggest home upgrade in British history. So how is the Secretary of State ensuring that clean energy is not only the right choice for clean emissions, but also for cutting bills, while avoiding past Conservative failures on insulation that left tens of thousands of homes with severe damp, mould and structural damage?
Well, look, I think my honourable friend speaks with very good sense on this. This is a huge opportunity for people. We're seeing record demand, and the question for this House and the question for all of us is, do we want that just to be for the wealthiest or for everyone? The point of the public investment is to make it within the reach of ordinary families. That's what is at the heart of this plan.
Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and commitment to improve energy efficiency in people's homes and reduce bills for constituents like mine in North West Leicestershire. As the Chair of the APPG on Future Homes Skills and Innovation, I'd welcome more details on the task force identified in the plan to ensure we have the skills and the innovation to meet the ambition that so my constituents can benefit from warmer homes as well as the good jobs that this sector can provide.
My honourable friend put it very well, and I'm sure the Minister will be happy to talk to her about how we can make sure that this task force does what she thinks is necessary to get the workforce we need.
Final question, Anna Dixon. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Secretary of State on behalf of the over 5,000 households in Shipley constituency who experience fuel poverty. Constituents have also benefited from Saltaire Retrofit Reimagined, a community initiative focused on improving energy efficiency within the Saltaire World Heritage Site. Would the Secretary of State assure residents of listed properties like those in Saltaire that they can too benefit from these upgrades?
Secretary of State.
Yeah, absolutely, and I pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend on this issue. We want these benefits to be spread as widely as possible. My honourable friend says he's going to be shortly visiting with my honourable friend to see this. Just as this is the final question, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to say one other thing, which is I just want to thank the civil service team that has worked on this plan, because over many, many months they have worked tirelessly on this plan, and I really want to put on record my thanks to them and indeed for members, and we look forward to engaging with people across the House on the implementation of this plan.
That is the end of the statement on Warm Homes Plan. I'll give the front benches a moment or two to shuffle over. Next one called If the Minister is ready, we come to the second statement on Water White Paper. Minister.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to make a statement on the publication of the Government's Water White Paper, A New Vision for Water. The paper sets out a once-in-a-generation reform, putting consumers and the environment first and building a water system fit for the future. For too long, the last Conservative government turned a blind eye. Perhaps that's why there isn't a single backbencher from the Conservative Party in the chamber to discuss this issue. They neglected the needs of people and the environment. The result, Madam Deputy Speaker, a whole system failure. Companies profiting at customers' expense, vital infrastructure left to crumble, record levels of pollution in our waterways, and public trust destroyed. No wonder none of them have turned up to sit in the backbenches. Oh, we may have one or two. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government inherited this terrible failure, and we are not shying away from it. Every family in this country deserves clean water from their taps, seas safe for their children to swim in, and bills that are fair and affordable. This government is turning the page on that Tory failure. Our goal is simple: a water system that delivers safe and secure water supplies, better water quality, and a fair deal for customers and indeed for investors. Within weeks of coming into office, this government asked Sir John Cunliffe to lead an independent water commission. Sir John met over 150 stakeholders, including environmental groups, investors, members of both houses and local communities. His call for evidence received more than 50,000 responses, much more interest from people out there than there is from the Conservative Party. I would like to thank Sir John and all those who contributed, including honourable and right honourable members. The White Paper sets out our response to his recommendations. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Cunliffe Review was vital, but we did not wait for its conclusions to act. In our first year in office, we laid the foundations for the transformation this White Paper sets out. We passed the Water Special Measures Act to give the regulator the power to ban bonuses for polluting water bosses and issue automatic fines for pollution. We ring-fence the money from consumers' bills so it can only be spent on fixing and upgrading infrastructure and improving water quality, not diverted to pay bonuses or dividends. We secured a historic investment of £104 billion of private sector investment to rebuild the water network, and we established the brand new Water Delivery Task Force to get spades in the ground, fast-track delivery of new infrastructure projects and drive economic growth. Madam Deputy Speaker, this white paper builds on these strong foundations and sets a new vision for water in this country. Our reform delivers 3 fundamental shifts. First, from fragmentation to coordination. Today, responsibility for water is scattered across 4 different regulators. The result is confusion, duplication, and regulatory gaps. We will change that. We will abolish Ofwat. We will create a new, more powerful regulator integrating economic and environmental regulation. And we will hold water companies to account, moving away from a system of self-monitoring where water companies have been marking their own homework to a more proactive and preventative approach. There will be nowhere to hide for poorly performing water companies. We will introduce an MOT approach for water company infrastructure, requiring maintenance checks on pipes, pumps and water treatment works. A chief engineer and engineering capability in the new regulator so that decisions are grounded in practical understanding. A new supervisory approach, holding companies to account in detail and recognising the different challenges they face. And a new performance improvement regime which will give the regulator the power to step in faster and put things right earlier. This is prevention-first regulation. However, regulation alone will not clean up our rivers, lakes and seas. We need everyone with a stake in our waterways pulling in the same direction. New reforms for regional planning will bring councils, water companies, farmers and developers together to tackle local pollution, manage water resources and support housing growth. This will strengthen community voices in the water system and drive greater use of nature-based solutions. Second, a shift from corporate interest to public interest. We must never lose sight of who this reform is for, customers and the environment. We will introduce an independent water ombudsman to resolve consumer disputes fairly. We will keep bills affordable with the wider rollout of smart meters to help those who need it most. And a new water efficiency label on every appliance. So when customers buy a washing machine or a shower, they will know exactly what it will cost, not just to buy that, but to run it to help bring their bills down. We are also cracking down on pollution at its source. We will tighten agricultural standards, including on sludge spreading. We will double funding for catchment partnerships, harnessing the power of nature to protect our rivers. Third and finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, a shift from short-term thinking to long-term planning. For too long, the water sector has lurched from one 5-year price review to the next, with no clear picture of where we are headed. We will publish a transition plan to provide a clear, simple roadmap for water companies, investors and the regulators. The plan will set out how the next price review delivers on these reforms, how we drive better coordination between existing regulators during the transition, and how we will make leadership appointments at the earliest opportunity to the new regulators board, including a chair designate. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long, the previous Conservative government turned a blind eye to water system failure. Infrastructure was neglected, pollution went unchecked, and public trust was betrayed. The White Paper draws a line under that era. The paper lays the groundwork for our upcoming water bill and puts us on a new path, a path where water companies act responsibly, where customers get the service they deserve, where investors can invest with confidence, and where there are clean rivers, lakes and seas that we can all enjoy. Madam Deputy Speaker, the British public voted for change, and we are delivering that change, building a system fit for the future. I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Victoria Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I thank the Secretary of State for advance copy of her statement. Indeed, may I welcome the Secretary of State to the Chamber. It's not often that she puts an appearance in. From the publication of the Minette Batters report to the animal welfare strategy published the 2 days before Christmas Eve, to the family farm tax fiasco, the Secretary of State has been noticeable by her absence. Indeed, she only intervened on the South East water crisis 7 days ago, months after Tunbridge Wells, East Grinstead and other areas have been suffering from that crisis. And she talks about this statement. Why does she have so little pride in her own water white paper? She announced this to the press on Monday. We were waiting for the statement. We were ready for it. No statement. They were, however, able to cancel the government's business on the public accountability legislation. That is ironic. We were waiting for a statement yesterday, no statement, and today she has finally given a statement on this white paper because there was an urgent question. And so when it comes to scrutiny and accountability, I think the Secretary of State should be a little bit careful before she criticises others for their chamber presence. Now, that being said, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do welcome, cautiously, elements of these proposals. Indeed, many of the measures the government have taken on water match our plans from before the 2024 election. When we entered government in 2010, only 7% of storm overflows were monitored by the previous Labour government. Now that stands at 100%. The Water Special Measures Act last year repackaged Conservative regulatory proposals such as banning unfair bonuses for water bosses, and we welcome that. And the so-called private investment that the Secretary of State keeps referring to is in fact paid for by bill payers. So let's not pretend otherwise. This investment, although it's needed, it's being paid for by all of our constituents through their bills. Now, talking about delay, in June and July last year, Sir John Cunliffe and his team published their review of the water sector. That report contained 88 recommendations. How many of the 88 recommendations are accepted by the government and included in the Water White Paper? Given that the Secretary of State for Energy has just announced £15 billion worth of taxpayers' money is to be spent on heat pumps and solar bills, which, to put it in context, is equivalent to most of the police funding for England and Wales, can she tell us how much taxpayer and bill payer money has been allocated to this white paper, and whether and how, over what time frame, these taxes and these bills will be used to pay for the work in this white paper? Can she confirm whether the government will extend environmental permit regimes to cattle farmers? And if so, how does she intend to ensure that the beef sector, which is already being hit by higher taxes under this government, the abrupt halt of farm funding, which has not been replaced, and the family farm tax fiasco, can she tell us how she hopes to ensure that the beef sector is not sunk by thousands of pounds worth of extra costs each year? How will the Secretary of State make sure that infrastructure is upgraded to ensure that catastrophic failures, such as those seen under South East Water in the last 2 months, do not happen again? And a glaring gap in the government's rhetoric on water is conserving and ensuring water security. That means improving supply. How and when will the government improve water security? Now, given the Minister's habits of missing their own deadlines, can she give an ironclad commitment that the transition plan will be published in parliamentary time this year? How long will the transition take? People expect change in the water sector and are beginning to tire of the sloth-like way in which this government conducts itself. The opposition fully support efforts by the government to hold water companies to account, building on the work of the last Conservative government to improve water quality and to deliver meaningful reform of the sector. We just need the government to get on with it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can say to the Right Honourable Lady, I will not take any lectures from the Conservative Party. Not only do they can't be bothered to turn up for this statement, which shows an absolute disregard for the concerns of the public, who are very concerned about the levels of pollution in our waterways. I will answer her questions. We have done more in 18 months than they did in 14 years, so I will not take any lectures from her. I am proud of our Water White Paper. I am proud that my predecessor commissioned somebody of the stature of Sir John Cunliffe and appointed the Independent Water Commission to do the most fundamental review of our water system since privatisation that happened under their Thatcher government. She asked how many recommendations we are taking forward. The vast majority of recommendations we are taking forward, and more, because we are looking at agricultural pollution, which we didn't ask Sir John to look at, but the Water White Paper does talk about tackling agricultural pollution, and I'm not going to shy away from that. We are working in partnership with farmers, the NFU and others, because it is an important source of water pollution. I will not again take lectures from her about the ELMS programme. When they underspent the farming budget, they couldn't even bother to get the money out the door. She asks about infrastructure being upgraded. The White Paper introduces a system that moves away from water companies marking their own homework to a regulator with teeth that absolutely gets a grip on the delivery of that £104 billion investment in infrastructure. And under their government, the pipes and the pumps, they were left in a shocking state of disrepair because there was not the regulation and the strong regulator that we need. That's what this Water White Paper and the upcoming water bill will deliver. She talks about improving water supply. It's absolutely correct. Maybe we can agree on something, that we have seen very poor performance from South East Water in recent weeks. And I was there last week to meet with constituents of the Honourable Member for Tunbridge Wells. She said, should I have gone earlier? Did she bother to go? Well, listen, this is a privatised industry because of decisions made in 1989. I called on the regulator, Ofwat, to examine the licence conditions and whether they had been breached by South East Water. I don't remember her saying any such thing. I have also said that I've hauled in the chair of South East Water to ask for an urgent investigation of what happened last week and the week before, but also for 2 weeks before Christmas. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this Water White Paper is the most ambitious reform in a generation to our water system, severely needed because of the blind eye that they took when they were in government and the record levels of pollution in our waterways.
Do you agree?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome this White Paper because right across the country, customers have been failed by their water company, but all too often, when turning to Ofwat for support and to hold executives to account, they've been met with bureaucracy and a weak response. So would the Secretary of State confirm that the creation of a new combined powerful water ombudsman set out in this White Paper will finally give customers a route to resolve complaints quickly when companies fail to deliver this most basic of public services?
Secretary of State. Well, I agree with my honourable friend, and that is the reason that the main focus of our reforms is to create a single, more powerful, integrated regulator, because at the moment, as I said in my statement, we have duplication, but we also have gaps, and we have consumers that are not being served well. So we need a regulator that gets a grip on the investment in maintaining our water infrastructure, that gets a grip on bearing down on pollution incidents that we've already made a start on, but the new regulator will have more teeth and more power to do so. So he's absolutely right to say that we need that single regulator, that more powerful integrated regulator, to ensure we deliver better outcomes for consumers and the environment.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst some proposals of this White Paper are welcome, it doesn't go far enough to guarantee the promised fundamental reforms. Record sewage spills of over 45 5,000 hours were recorded in Glastonbury and Somerton last year. The public are left in the dark as the government refuses to record the true scale of the volume of sewage dumped, rather than just the duration. Fat cat retention payments continue as water companies evade the 2025 ban on bonuses. Former Wessex Water CEO landed a £170,000 bonus through their parent company, YTL, with Ofwat apparently powerless to support it. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, why does the government refuse to address the failed ownership model that has allowed pollution, underinvestment and profiteering to persist for decades? And will the Minister listen to Liberal Democrat calls for water companies to become mutually owned public benefit corporations?
I thank her for, I think, some support for the White Paper and what she has said. I think we both share real concerns about the status quo. What I would say to her on mutual ownership is that I don't really hear a plan from the Liberal Democrats as to how to get to that point. Hear me out. If it involves whole-scale nationalisation, given that these are private companies, then that would cost around £100 billion and would be legally complex and take years of wrangling through the courts. My focus is on improving the status quo, on ensuring that we are tackling levels of pollution, which she rightly says are still happening. We've already got now, from January last year, 100% of storm overflows are being monitored. So we are shining a light on some of this pollution. We've still got a way to go, but we are bearing down on the pollution that she rightly talks about. But my solution to this crisis and this issue is to make sure that we have a complete overhaul of regulation, of the regulators, and the way that consumers are not at the moment put at the centre of things. So we protect the consumer in a much more meaningful way by introducing a water ombudsman with statutory powers. So we are making some progress and we will make more. And I know that her and I agree on some things. We may disagree on some of the details, but we're absolutely determined to deliver a system that delivers better outcomes for consumers and the environment.
Deputy Speaker, those of us in this House who have sat on the Environment Select Committee and grilled the water bosses know all too well how broken this industry is. So I really welcome the government's commitment to addressing the failures of the industry with these important reforms. As the Secretary of State knows, in Hastings and Rye we've faced major water outages. In May 24, the main pipe supplying Hastings burst, leaving 30,000 homes without water for days. It also burst this Christmas, leaving people without water on Christmas Day. We since found out they got planning permission in 2007 to replace it, but sat on their hands instead of replacing it. But they are this month beginning the work to replace that pipe because of the pressure that I and this government have been putting on the water industry. And these measures introducing MOTs on broken water infrastructure will be critical for preventing that kind of thing happening in future. One of the things I have campaigned on is having clear guidance in the event of an outage. Conditions that water companies must provide, not just bottled water, but hygiene facilities, portaloos, and the committee has also recommended that. So could the Secretary of State look at that request so that we can be better prepared if outages do occur?
Can I commend her leadership on this issue? I know on Christmas Eve she was putting pressure on Southern Water. She was concerned about the outages that happened previously, but also that were likely to occur. She's absolutely right. We need more emphasis on ensuring that companies like Southern Water are investing in the infrastructure that is needed to prevent these outages in the first place. We're moving from a system of fix on failure to prevention. That's what this white paper is all about.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome what's in the white paper? It should lead to more effective regulation, but just a couple of words of caution. First of all, the Drinking Water Inspectorate is the only part of this setup that works well, so folding it into a new regulator should not lose that ability. And on agricultural pollution, can she work with the farmers so that this doesn't just become another stick with which to beat them? She referred to it as a whole system failure, and she's right about that. She will have seen from her recent welcome engagement with South East Water, however, that what you've got there is corporate failure, not just of management, but of non-exec directors directors and shareholders, because, as the Select Committee said, this is an industry that has a real problem with its culture. What we've got in the White Paper, welcome as it is not going to shift that. When will we hear from the Government what they're going to do to change the culture in the industry?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, and I thank the EFRA Select Committee Chair for his thoughtful reflections. I agree with him on the Drinking Water Inspectorate. I think they do a magnificent job, and we will make sure that we, as he says, transfer their strengths into the new single water regulator. I agree with him also that we will and we are working in partnership with farmers to make sure we get this right. We are looking at what we can do with the ELM schemes to ensure that we give them the support they need to tackle pollution of our waterways from agriculture. He talks about culture. I think that he does have a point, but what I would say is I do think that the leadership of some of these companies is very varied. We do see good leadership in some of the companies. For example, Severn Trent that I visited, and they've got a terrific apprenticeship programme. So we need to ensure that we see better performance in the water industry across the board, sharing that best practice from some of those companies who are actually doing the right thing.
Thank
you very much. Last night, a 30-inch water main burst at Holland Park roundabout on the boundary of my and my honourable friend for Kensington and Bayswater's constituencies. Homes and cars were flooded to a depth of 3 feet, and since the water was diverted away from the burst, thousands of residents across West London have had little or no fresh water. Schools are closed and traffic is in chaos. This and hundreds of smaller bursts in the recent cold weather are the legacy of Thames Water's failure over not years but decades. Can I thank the Minister for her statement and say that for my constituents, effective inspection and regulation cannot come soon enough.
I thank my honourable friend and thank him for raising this issue. I am being kept regularly updated on the issue that he talked about in Holland Park. I understand that there are 2,000 households off supply. This is unacceptable, and I know that both the regulator but also myself and DEFRA are working closely with the water company to make sure that we get on top of this issue.
Josh Brabarinde.
Speaker, not only is it the likes of South East Water and Southern Water that are failing Eastbourne with yet another outage last week, but it is also shipping companies that are damaging our water quality. In Eastbourne, we have seen thousands of bags of oven chips wash up on Eastbourne Beach. But the serious issue is that their decomposition will impact on marine wildlife and the local ecosystem. And I know that Sussex MPs on the shore have experienced a similar thing, whether it's with onions, with bananas, with body lotion from the White Company, and more. So shipping companies are not mentioned at all in this white paper. Will the Minister meet with me and with Sussex MPs on the coastline to address this issue and ensure that they pay their fair share towards cleaning up our sea?
Much shorter questions, please.
I thank him for that question. Myself or the Water Minister would be very happy to meet him. I had heard about the incident about the chips on the beach. We are looking in the white paper more broadly at other sources of pollution, including those from transport and agriculture, but we'd be very happy to have a meeting with him to discuss the issue.
Clive Lewis.
After 18 months, an independent inquiry, and the government's answer is more regulation. Not enforcing the law as it is. Not one water company has lost its licence after what it's done. And yet we think that more bureaucracy, more regulation will make a difference. More bureaucracy will not fix our water. I'm afraid the Secretary of State needs to know the problem is ownership. Private monopolies with guaranteed incomes have asset stripped, polluted rivers and paid themselves billions. And until that changes, nothing will change. So will the Secretary of State meet with me and other water campaigners to discuss this document, because we can't see any public consultation in the white paper? Will she at least commit to that, please?
Secretary of State.
I'm always happy to meet with honourable friends, as he well knows. But what I would say to him is that Sir John met with many different stakeholders and members of the public, and we had 50,000 responses to the Independent Water Commission. It is right now that the government gets on with it, sets the direction, lays the foundations for the Water White Paper. I disagree with him on what he says about introducing more regulation. We need a regulator with more teeth, with more powers to enforce the law as it stands, and that's what we're getting on with.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I welcome many of the measures in this white paper. More regulation will help. But let's be honest, it doesn't get to the heart of the problem, and that is the failure of the privatisation of the water industry. We need to be talking about ownership. That's absent from this paper. And I've heard the conversations in this chamber already today about nationalisation. I agree with the Minister. There will be some drawbacks to a model of nationalisation. It will put substantial liabilities on the book, and it will put sewage infrastructure investment up against investment in schools and hospitals in every budget. But there is another model that the Liberal Democrats are putting forward of cooperative or mutualisation models. Will the Minister take that model into serious consideration?
This is a government that cares deeply about mutuals, and we have pledged overall to double the number of mutuals. I don't have a problem with mutual ownership. The problem I have is the Liberal Democrats have no plan to get there.
James Asser.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are not receiving the service they deserve, many of them facing real issues over water pressure, which is intermediate, unreliable and some days non-existent. It's even being raised with me by primary school children when I'm on school visits. Can the Secretary of State reassure my constituents that the White Paper will begin to force the water companies to take action on these day-to-day issues that really affect people's lives? And if they don't, that the regulator will give weight to those complaints and have the kind of teeth that forces them to act so my constituents get the service they deserve and, frankly, are already paying for?
Secretary of State.
Yes, indeed. And the new water regulator, when we're able to legislate for that and set it up, will indeed look at issues that are put consumers at the heart of what they're doing.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was supposed to meet with Severn Trent at a local treatment works in my constituency in December. It was cancelled at short notice after heavy rainfall. They said they didn't want me to get my feet wet. I smell a cover-up. The government's well-intentioned white paper is doomed to fail, though, if they don't mandate water companies to measure their sewage outflows by volume. Is the government going to do that or not?
Well, I thank him for his question. We are absolutely determined to ensure that we bear down on pollution, but we are looking more at the number of incidents and ensuring that we have a better picture of the coverage of storm overflow. So we've got 100% coverage from January last year. We're looking to increase the amounts of coverage for emergency overflows. And the white paper as a whole will ensure that the new, more powerful regulator has the teeth and the powers to crack down on pollution and shine a light on the pollution incidents so that there is nowhere to hide for the illegal use of some of these overflows that we've seen in the past.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for this white paper, and I concur with some of the comments from many colleagues. I attended a community meeting last week on Kennington Park Estate in my constituency, hearing from residents from Blythe, Alveston and Lockwood House. Many of them hadn't had water since Christmas. We have a situation where it fell on a housing association, and I do want to pay credit to Hyde Housing for responding and providing water to many residents, many of them with children, many elderly, many residents with mobility issues. We have a situation where Thames Water think it is not their job to inform councils and housing associations when they are going to lower the pressure on their estates when they're doing works. Can we please ensure that this new regulator will actually have the right teeth to go after these regulators, because all fines or warnings, they ignore everything. This regulator needs to have teeth. If not, it's going to be a slap in the face to all our hard-working constituents.
I can promise her that that's exactly what we're going to deliver, a new, more powerful
Order, order. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this oral evidence session of the Welsh Affairs Select Committee. My name is Ruth Jones and I'm the chair of the committee. Our session today is on the future of rugby in Wales, and I am very grateful to Abby Tierney and Richard Collier-Keywood for appearing before us in person. Really, really helpful, thank you. May I add as well that it's a pleasure to see Abby back in her role, and we wish you well on your ongoing recovery. Today's session is an opportunity to cut through the noise and ask questions about rugby in Wales, not past challenges or missteps, but the future of how we secure the future of rugby from grassroots to the national teams. And I'm grateful to many, many, many members of the public who've been in touch with us on this subject. And I'm particularly grateful to many constituents who've stopped me in the street, the supermarket, the pub, the church, to tell me and share their thoughts on the state of Welsh rugby. Welsh rugby is not merely a sport, it is a national institution and a source of identity and a major contributor to economic and community life across Wales. It's therefore essential that decisions affecting the game's future are taken transparently on the basis of sound evidence and in accordance with the highest standards of governance. I should warn you now that we may be expecting votes at some point during the afternoon, so my apologies in advance for any delays that may cause. If the bell sounds, I'm afraid the committee members will have to leave to vote. But let me return now to rugby, and with the thoughts about higher standards of governance and sound evidence firmly in our minds. Let me begin by asking both Abby Tierney and Richard Collier-Keywood. Well, we've heard from many people that rugby in Wales is in a state of turmoil, with the future of professional club rugby unclear. Cardiff is in administration. High-profile players like Jack Morgan, Dewi Lake, Aaron Wainwright, all leaving for England, and obviously disappointing results on the pitch. So can you explain how you intend to solve these problems?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. It would probably be a good idea if I started back about 2 years ago when we put the board together, because as you rightly say, at that point in time, governance was in a state of flux following the BBC programme which had happened earlier in 2023. So I spent the first 6 months between July 23 and the end of the year actually improving governance by recruiting a brand new board. As you probably realise, we have 4 elected members of our board who are drawn from the community clubs, and we have 8 members who are appointed, including myself and Abby. We have spent the last 2 years as a board building a sustainable future for Welsh rugby, and let me explain to you some of the components of that. The first is, over that period of time, we have professionalised and we put in place good governance. So you'll find that we are, I hope, a well-run board with well-run committees, looking at evidence before we make our decisions, thinking through all the options and coming to conclusions. The second thing we've done is that when I first arrived, we were absolutely up against our banking covenants. The WRU was in special measures from our major bank, and we couldn't do anything financially without talking to our bank at the time, which was NatWest, and we really were totally up against it from a financial perspective. So for the last year and a half, 2 years, we've been improving the finances of the Welsh Rugby Union. We issued our accounts at the end of November for the year to 30 June 2025, and that showed a really significant increase in our earnings profile. So that meant that we were able to put Welsh Rugby on a sustainable footing. It was a year of transition, and there's better things to come ahead of us, but basically the economic rock on which we're based is now much, much stronger, and that was an essential prerequisite. We're announcing actually today, over the course of today and tomorrow, that we've completed a major refinancing of all the debt in the Welsh Rugby Union, repaying both National Westminster Bank and also the Welsh Government through the Welsh Development Bank of Wales, fully repaid, and we're being backed now by 2 international organisations which again set the bedrock for the future of Welsh rugby. They are Goldman Sachs and HSBC. And neither of those 2 organisations would have invested in us if they'd had any concerns about our governance or the future plans that we've put forward to them. And I think that's a real statement of positivity towards the future of Welsh rugby. So we're now on a sustainable financial footing. If I turn now to rugby, which obviously is our business, and it's the reason why we're ultimately there, we found a system that was essentially broken. Coming through COVID, to give a bit of context to it, the Welsh Rugby Union and the clubs in particular, the 4 professional clubs, were starved of resources. When I first came into this role, we were putting a player budget together of about £4.5 million per club, which is about half that which many other clubs that you would recognise as successful clubs were getting around the world. So the future of Welsh rugby was imperilled. The investment had not been there in the pathways by the WRU because of a shortage of financial resources, hence the reason why we're so focused in the first year and a half of putting financial resources in place. And if I pick up the story from where we are today, we have a plan to invest somewhere between 6.5–7 million into our clubs, which make them much more competitive on a European and national stage.
Let me stop you there because we're going to talk more about the finances further on. But, I mean, basically the WRU is subject to ongoing widespread criticism, and you're also facing the prospect of an extraordinary general meeting. So do you believe you have sufficient support amongst the fans, the players and the club officials to take Welsh rugby forward?
Yes, we do. And we understand that it has been a time of turmoil, and we're both strong Welsh Rugby Union supporters, so we feel that as well. But unfortunately, the rugby system was broken. The pathways were broken, and we announced back at the end of October, following the largest consultation, I think, in Welsh sporting history, a way forward for that, which included an investment plan of £28 million over 5 years to essentially fix that problem. And yes, we're at the start of it. We also announced a reduction, which I'm sure we'll want to talk about, in terms of the Welsh professional clubs from 4 to 3 clubs, because that is both the affordable way forward, but it's the way forward as well that will enable our rugby to improve. When we sat down as a board and looked at the rugby players that we had in the system who were Welsh, we didn't feel we had enough for 4 teams. We had something over 30 non-Welsh qualified players which were being paid for by our professional clubs in Wales, and frankly that was a waste of money in the longer term. So we've gone back to saying our goal is to have 3 clubs. The investment we've made will connect the community clubs, very importantly, to the regional sides, or the new 3 clubs, and that involves 12 PDCs, player development centres across Wales, which means that there'll be much more opportunity for young people in Wales to actually see icons and to play in an environment where they get first-class coaching.
Let me stop you there, because obviously we can read the details. Thank you very much for that. But what I'm going to hand on to Anne Davies now, because we're interested to get into the detail and the strength of feeling.
I'd like to ask Abby a question as Chief Exec of the WRU. As custodians of rugby union in Wales, how do you evaluate the cultural, social and economic significance to the country? And I'm thinking particular of the Welsh language in West Wales, which is my area, where our players have the opportunity to develop their skills naturally from grassroots, from their club level at your village club level in my patch, through to the regional rugby. So it's that element, how do you evaluate?
It's a really good question, and as a girl that used to go with her granddad to watch Barry play, at a weekend, and I loved it. And I loved that sense of being part of a community and part of a family, and it made me who I am today. Those interactions, and I think it's so and that's why I wanted this role, because actually in Wales rugby matters so much to so many people, and it isn't just a game. It is part of the fabric of our society. So actually evaluating it is almost hard, but I'll give you some of the ways we do that. So one of the ways is economic contribution that rugby makes to Wales. So the stadium in its own right makes a significant contribution to Wales, but then in every, you go to some of the rugby clubs, they're often the heart of the community, and sometimes the only asset left in the community after other things have had to shut or close. So they drive economic there, but then I also so we evaluate that, and if you look in our annual report, the impact that it has on things like community cohesion, that it has on mental health, that it has on education and educational attainment. So all of those things are really important. And then the Welsh language as well is so critical, and we want to promote that more and more. We do everything that we can that is bilingual. We encourage we look at when we're recruiting people that they understand and value the Welsh culture. So we evaluate it in all of that in the round, but it's almost intangible in some ways because it's a feeling as much as it is a number, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I just want to say, I mean, North Wales, you see the female pathway in North Wales, I think is one of the best, and we see some brilliant female rugby players coming through there. So I'm really excited in this plan about how we can really put some fantastic infrastructure in North Wales as well, because I think it's been underinvested in the recent years.
Because that's one of my biggest concerns really is grassroots rugby, and I know we're coming to that in detail later on, but the village clubs which inevitably feed into our semi-professional clubs and then on to the regions. So what support are you giving to the hundreds of volunteers in order to maintain this stream of players? And I'm going to say this, and please don't take it personally, both of you, but I don't really truly believe that the WRU understands grassroots or the importance of grassroots rugby in Wales, and by that I mean our village clubs and the support that they need. Our national team players start within those village clubs, not as it happens in England where you have academies within your private schools. We don't have that in Wales. It starts within our villages. And it's so important for that steady stream of players to come through. Or as Max Boyce famously once said, you know, about the factory that produces our outside halves. We haven't got that. That's not being supported, and that really does need support.
One of the things that the team has done, and it's really interesting, because I hear that you don't think we are supporting, so we need to get better at how we communicate that.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
So we've introduced a new club investment model this year across all of our clubs, where we're looking to ensure that those clubs are supported and the volunteers are supported to run as effective a club as possible. And with that comes training, comes education, but comes real genuine support with those clubs. So, and we're getting very positive feedback from the clubs on that club investment model. Also, as part of the plan, we're investing more in the community clubs. So we're not taking money from the community and the grassroots and putting it into the professional game because of the work we've done to stabilise the finances. So even this year, we've increased the investment in community clubs by 250,000. We've also already secured £1.5 million worth of grants for our community clubs, which we're working with them on, and we've implemented a facilities grant this year to improve their facilities as well. So I think this new club investment model, and what we're saying is, as you go through the accreditation, and we've got some of the clubs doing that first, that will enable them to be well governed. It's about increasing the diversity in those clubs, so that both from all different angles, and enable those clubs to really run. So I do think at the heart of this, a lot of the news, a lot of the coverage is on what's happening in the professional game, but there's brilliant work going on at the grassroots level.
Oh, very quick bits again, sorry.
No,
I want to ask both of you really, how many grassroots clubs have you visited? You know, your Nantgaredigs, which is just down the road from me, or your Pennebank, which is just up the road. So, you know, how many clubs have you actually gone into and spoken to the people who are there? That's number one. And the other one is about the whole of Wales aspect. Gogledd Cymru is hugely underrepresented and without any professional rugby at all. So how can we call ourselves a national game? And I believe rugby is a national game, and I'm really passionate about this. Rugby is our national game, but how can we call it a national game if it's not represented Wales-wide? So first of all, how many clubs have you been to? Generally, village clubs?
Yeah, generally too many to count from my perspective, I would hope. So I went back to one last week. I remember the last time I went there, it was blue skies, now it was raining, and I recognise a lot of people into the club. I try and get to one every week or two if I can, and I'll go and I'll turn up at the district meetings, but I'll also try and get to clubs. I'll try and go and get to see a game, because that's where I connect. So I do it as much as I can, and because I'm conscious if I'm not out there and hearing and listening and meeting people, I don't know whether we're doing the things that we need to do. So I don't keep a count on it, but over the last 2 years I've been regularly to local clubs.
What about the point of Wales Wide?
Yes, so and it is really important. I think one of the things that happens, so if I take some of the impacts in North Wales most recently, and I've been up to North Wales and I've met with our clubs and our members up there, is because of the financial situation and because of COVID, we have lost some of the investment in North Wales. And as part of this plan, I mean, we're going up in March to actually talk to them about how we can invest in North Wales going forward, and so that it does feel like a national game. And we've got some ideas that we want to share with them. So I would say at the moment, you're right to be frustrated, and you're right to be asking for more support and investment in Wales, not just at the grassroots level, but right the way through. And we're committed to doing that as part of our plan going forward.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And Richard Collicky, would you like to answer how many local games or local derbies, for instance, you've been to in the last, say, 6 weeks?
I have tried to do one a month during my tenure here. That's roughly that's my goal, and I think I've just about achieved that probably.
Yeah. And you've got to remember, Richard's 1 day a week as opposed to me, who's full time. So I think we've got to reflect that you've got other commitments, but we do generally. And I was at the Scarlets game on Sunday, so you mentioned local derbies. So I also try and kind of get to those games too. And as does
know
Richard.
that board members are getting out as well, though, not
yes,
just the chief
they are.
exec.
Absolutely.
Very important. Andrew Ranger, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for coming today. Just to add a little bit on that last point you were talking about, you've got the One Wales strategy, but it frequently sort of treats community games like as a monolith. So what would work for sort of a small population club in somewhere like Bala, for example, it does not scale for a city like Wrexham, which is my area. So, how is the strategy nuanced to help those sort of the differences between the high growth, high population centres in North Wales, for example, compared to the smaller ones that my colleague mentioned, perhaps?
It is a really good question, Andrew. And having been to Bala, you recognise and how, just getting there, just how different it is, to somewhere like Wrexham or some of the heavier population. And the club investment model that I talk about, and I'm really happy actually, and maybe, we should have put that as some of the appendices, and we're going to be doing some videos about what we're trying to do there. It is absolutely at its core is about saying how are these clubs different and what is the different support that they need. So it's not one size fits all. So if I go somewhere and depending on the population, the demographics, how many schools feed into that club, there's all different factors that will drive that club and what it needs. And there's a number of different pillars in the club investment model that will enable it to be targeted around where that club is and its evolution and what support it needs. And then the way we've structured our community game and the support we put into that with our rugby engagement officers, which are assigned to each patch. They know that patch, they understand what's the difference about that patch, so that they'll really build those relationships, and those clubs will know who is their person that they can reach out to and contact and can work with on what they need. So we're trying to make it as localised as possible, whilst and then the best practice bit that starts to come out of there, because actually clubs that have similar challenges can learn from other clubs because they'll see what they're doing. So we're trying to build that in as well.
It might be worth, Abby, you saying a little bit more about that move we made, because that was a very significant move to rugby engagement officers to try and improve the support we were giving to clubs.
So, and that was a really interesting example in North Wales actually, because we had previously hub officers, and you'll have heard some news and probably some of your constituents have talked about that. So we had hub officers, but we didn't have consistent coverage. So where we did have hub officers, they were brilliant. And I have to say that they often did a fantastic role and had built those relationships. But because they were paid for partly by schools, and those schools were they paid for part of it. A lot of schools can no longer afford to fund their bit of those. So we found that there were some areas that had no coverage at all and others that still had great coverage, and we felt that wasn't actually a fair way of running the system when we only have so much money to spend. So we chose at the time, through consultation with our council and with our member clubs, to change that model so that it was consistent coverage. So now every area has a rugby engagement officer that's a named person that they can work with, so that there isn't unequal coverage.
Yeah, exactly.
This is one of my later questions. So how does that work though? So you've got some hub offices or engagement offices that are dealing with sort of 9 schools and several things, and in other places you've got sort of almost like a 1-to-1 ratio. So how does that work out in reality?
No, we did really clear analysis based on demographics, number of clubs, number of schools and things, so that and even looked at the kind of distances that engagement officers would have to travel to make sure that so they don't all so we don't have that disparity. Obviously it's not a perfect system and we're monitoring it closely. We've just done a 6-month review and we'll continue to do that, but we've tried to make sure that all of them have jobs that are doable and that everybody gets as fair a share of that input as they can.
Thank you.
Kemi Badenoch, please.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds sort of like you're approaching this like a sort of management consultancy might do. I don't know whether is that something that you've considered in terms of the feeling from the community, the sentiment of the community, but the way you've done it in terms of you talk about demographics. Is that something that you're aware of and you haven't managed to bring your stakeholders with you because of the language and because of the way that you've approached this?
I think, Henry, I think it's, and I've seen that criticism. So look, I think I'm not going to apologise for being data-led and evidence-led, but I think hopefully you've also heard in me that I absolutely believe and have a passion for the Welsh culture and the sense of community and family in Wales. So, because actually if we don't we were going to fail as a union and we were going to fail at all levels. We hadn't invested, we didn't have the money. So unless we took that evidence and data-led approach, we couldn't have secured the future of rugby. So I think you've got to somehow find a way to bridge the two. So I don't think there's anything... I think you can have a data and evidence-led approach that then protects Welsh rugby and puts it on a sustainable footing going forwards. If we need to reflect and think about how we're describing that and the language that we're using, but when I'm out in the clubs, I'm not getting that they're disconnected from it. I'm not hearing that.
Well, I mean, we've had extraordinary general, community clubs calling for extraordinary general meetings. I mean, that's indicative of the fact that maybe it's not all okay on the community level. I mean, and your response to that is that that's just going to set back improvements following your the report that came out that labelled you as sexist, homophobic, misogynist. I mean, that's quite a strange way to approach it, isn't it? In terms of your grassroots is saying to you one thing and then your approach is something different.
So let's just factually we haven't received anything from the community clubs. So
I thought you had the Central Glamorgan Rugby Union.
They have written to their club, to other clubs. So it's one club that is one associate member club has written to other clubs to see if there'd be a support for an EGM. We have not had received to right up till today. We've received nothing back. We have spoken to all the districts, and what we are hearing back overall, and we have spoken to every single district. That's for those who aren't aware of how we work. We have clubs, and then each club is part of a district. We are not hearing that there is general support for it, Henry. So I think it's again about the news and how it's covered, but we haven't yet had any call for an EGM.
Richard, did you want to add anything to what Abby's just set out?
Yeah, I was going to come back to your professional point, to be honest, or the management consulting point. I would say that there is a balance here. When I first arrived, it wasn't to do with leading with evidence, it wasn't to do with looking at data at all. And I think Abby's really professionalised that with her team. And that's really important. If we're making very important decisions for the future of Welsh rugby, which is a massive economic contributor to Wales, I think everyone would want it done properly and professionally. And that's what Abby and her team has brought to that. That's not the way we communicate most of the time, depending on who our audience is. And also, the board, being at a board meeting is fascinating. There are 4 elected members around that table, and there's 8 people who are appointed. I think 11 of us are Welsh. We would identify as being clearly Welsh. One would identify as being English. And around that table, there is a very strong voice from community clubs, which is brought by the 4 elected members. They do a super job of representing the council, which is made up of 19 people, which we meet with regularly to brief them after every board meeting and to have conversations slightly more strategically every couple of months with them. So there is a really strong community voice around our table.
And coming back to this culture point, in terms of evidencing these changes, you talked about these governance changes that you've done since that independent review. Are there more examples that you can provide to the committee about how you've used that review to embed systemic changes within the WRU?
Yeah, shall I mention a couple and then you go on to the HR stuff? So I think the first thing is actually that we have been very clear about what behaviours are acceptable, both inside WRU circles and at clubs. And I spent a fair bit of time in my first 6 months or 12 months talking to individuals where behaviours were challenging, and we've tried to both role model those behaviours ourselves in terms of how we operate, but also where we have complaints, and we have opened up, very clear both whistleblowing and also direct complaints, which are not necessarily anonymous. We've dealt with those complaints transparently and I think very fairly, with everyone involved feeling very heard about it. I will come back to one very difficult, I regard a very difficult period of time, which was with the Welsh female players' contracts. There, I was contacted by one of the Welsh players as effectively a whistleblowing exercise about how they felt they'd been treated. We sent 2 of our board members to do a detailed investigation of that. We found that a lot of what they said had been true. We apologised for it. I fronted a lot of those meetings with the Wales women players directly, together with 2 of our board members who almost worked full time on this for maybe 6 weeks. And we reached, I think, a successful conclusion. That was an example, I think, of us taking poor behaviours very seriously and acting on them and dealing with the people involved. Do you want to talk about some of the culture work which is going on, Abby? I think that would be helpful.
No, and that's why I was really interested and very reflective of your question, Henry, on the data and that idea of professionalisation almost being at odds with or in conflict with kind of the things that I love about being Welsh: community, family, a collective sense of belonging, etc. Because I think they can come together in a really powerful way, and I think it's what's unique about Welsh Rugby. So we are doing that culture work. We are learning about how we can improve and make sure that our communications does kind of represent our values. So I think that is really important. But I think on a governance bit, one of the things I would say has changed based on what I hear. We had a meeting today with our clubs where we were talking through our financial results from last year. And when I'm out there and talking to our members, and because we are a membership, they say you are so much more transparent than we've had before. So previously, I think WRU was seen as this kind of black box over there, but we're out there, and our CFO went to every district meeting to present our results from last year, was very happy to take any challenge, any questions, provide extra information if there was some. So I think part of that governance is about we're held to account by our members who are also our shareholders, which is why we also said an EGM is part of their process if they want it. But I do believe that we've put other mechanisms in place now for people to feel they can raise questions, raise challenge, scrutinise our decisions and what we're doing.
Thank you, Henry. Ben Lake, please.
Thank you.
And can I make a plea, sorry, for we've got a lot of questions we want to ask you, so
shorter.
Brief answers would be really much appreciated. Thank you, Ben.
I'll do my best, Chair, as well, to be brief. Mr Colleague, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you'd successfully refinanced a lot of debt, and I believe I heard you correctly that both the NatWest debt and also the Welsh Government debt. So I'm just wondering, as a first question, would that be the sort of £35 million with NatWest and then the 18 million commercial loan?
I think there was about 12 million outstanding to Welsh Gov, I think, yes. And the full amount of the NatWest.
Yes. And then I wonder then, you also mentioned that Goldman Sachs and HSBC had agreed to invest. Did they invest more than just to cover the previous debt? And if so, could you perhaps share with us that information and also perhaps the terms of that investment in terms of the length of time for the repayment and the rate?
Yeah, of course. So I'm doing a little bit of this from memory, and if I get it wrong, I'll go back on the record with you later, if that's all right. So the core terms is it's shared roughly equally between Goldman Sachs and HSBC. Obviously, HSBC being more local to us in Cardiff, they'll provide the main core banking facilities for us. We have a 50 million total debt from them, with a 5 million for specific projects on the side of that, so 55 million in total. The terms are better than what we had before from Welsh Gov, by about 1 percentage point, I think. So, and this obviously changed. I think our terms are something like SONIA plus 2.75, I think, something like that. We have chosen to do, we were originally intending to refinance out for 10 to maybe 20 years, and we thought, and the reason why we approached Goldman's originally was because we thought we would get a better deal, longer term deal on the US paper markets, because I think of largely some of the turmoil that we need to sort out first. We didn't think going to the US paper markets at this point in time for a 10-year or 20-year debt would be appropriate. So having taken some advice, we've done a refinancing for about 3.5 years, I think, which we see as essentially a bridge to get us through the next 3.5 years, to enable us to make the investments we've committed to in this cycle. And, you know, probably in 2 years, 2.5 years' time, we will start to go out and feel our way into a longer-term debt refinancing. And a part of that would be also to do probably some significant redevelopments on the stadium and related areas. So,
thank you. A couple of things, if I may, but thank you very much for that detail. You mentioned the stadium there, and I noticed that on Companies House is a charge on the 19th of January on that. Is that related to this financing deal with Goldman Sachs and HSBC? And then the 5 million that you say is effectively hypothecated, are you able to elaborate a little bit as to what those projects will be?
I'm not actually sure we've determined all those projects as of yet. And the other thing that's probably very relevant in terms of thinking about where you're going with that is we did a deal in November, I think it was, with Aramark as a new food and beverage catering supplier. And although some of the terms of that are commercial, they put a very substantial amount of money on the table to enable us to do improvements in the stadium to do with our food and beverage offering. And obviously that gets recaptured through their contract over a period of time. We won't get any of that done before the forthcoming Six Nations, but we hope before the Nations Championship later in this year, our fans will start to see some brilliant changes in terms of their experience in food and beverage in the stadium. One of the other stadiums that Aramark have is Everton, which is, you know, we visited some of the other ones that Aramark have done in the competitive tender that we put out. So I think you'll see a big improvement and very positive from fans.
I very much hope so. But the 3.5 years is obviously not where we'd want to be. And I know that's probably not where the union would like to be either. I'm just interested if you are able to share a little bit more about the sort of the information and the business models, I suppose, that you would have presented to the investors in order to get them to invest. And, you know, specifically of interest, perhaps, you know, are there any ticket revenues sort of targets or assumptions? And also sponsorship, because I think a lot of those deals are coming up. And how they might relate also to the structure of the professional game.
Yes, so we put in place a 5-year plan, which we shared with our two debt providers, and I spent many happy evenings on the phone to the United States talking to one of them around the detail of some of those plans. And there are obviously some significant uncertainties there. There's an arbitration which we're engaged in with Scarlets. There is the head injury litigation, which we, together with World Rugby and the RFU, are engaged in. So we obviously had to represent fairly what was going on in those situations. Those 5-year plans were pretty detailed. They involved obviously revenue by source, and then our cost base, and then coming down to what we're very focused on now over the last 2 years, which is our earnings, so EBITDA. And then at that point in time, we make distributions to our professional clubs and also to our community clubs as well. So, but we do track that line. It might be worth us saying that an essential thing for us to actually commit to this refinancing was to take all of our regional clubs off what we call PRA, Professional Rugby Agreement 2023, because that agreement basically shared the economic risk of the union with the 4 professional clubs and had a guardrail in it that I'm going to simplify it hugely for sake of time, meant that we could not earn any more than £1 million a year as a WRU going forwards, which, given when I certainly came into this role, we had a potential debt mountain of 30-40 million. If you could only make £1 million worth of income, not many people would be very interested in refinancing that level of debt with you because you couldn't afford to repay it. So getting all the clubs off PRA 2023 was an essential prerequisite to creating financial stability for the clubs going forwards. And I know there's been a lot of noise about that, but we could not have done the refinancing unless we'd actually had all clubs off PRA 2023 and onto a new professional rugby deal, which you obviously see us in the midst of negotiating over the next few months.
Thank you. And I promise the Chair, I'll finish on this question very briefly. Perhaps you might be able to provide the committee in written form some of the detailed lines in the 5-year plan. But if I could ask you just now, in terms of your discussions with the debtors for this refinancing agreement, as far as the professional game is concerned, the number of clubs, what was the model presented to them? What is in the 5-year plan?
So there was a number for distributions to professional clubs,
Right, okay.
because when we started this process, we were assuming, I think, a different number of professional clubs than when we maybe got into the refinancing in detail, which was in November and December. But the number we focused on was the distribution number, because essentially that's what they were interested in. They weren't actually interested in how many, they were interested in what the level of the distribution was.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Henry Tufnell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just quickly ask about COVID loans and how the responsibility is divided between the WRU and the regions in respect of repayment?
I first go. So basically, and appreciate wasn't there at the time, so I'm doing this somewhat by historic record. My understanding was that on the COVID loans that government banks, including some of the Sybil's loans at the time, would not have wanted to go directly to the clubs because they didn't feel like their credit risk was manageable. So all the loans for COVID came via the WRU, and the WRU passed them on exactly in terms to the 4 professional clubs.
And so in terms of repayment, that sits entirely with the WRU?
So the repayment to the banks, or Development Bank of Wales, which were the outstanding ones when I certainly came into this role, they were the responsibility of the WRU, but the WRU had lent that money on to the 4 professional clubs, so there were back-to-back repayments coming from the professional clubs to the WRU, which would have enabled the WRU to make those debt repayments to the banks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. So going back a year or so ago, the WRU, you attempted to agree a new licensing agreement with all 4 clubs, but then within a few short weeks, you'd gone down to say you could only have two clubs. And then in the autumn, we're talking about 3 clubs. You can understand, can't you, that, not just the club's uncertainty, but also the public's uncertainty about where you're going with all of this. So I just wonder, why is the changes? Why are you chopping and changing?
So maybe I can suggest that. So one of the things we spotted as a board was that we needed to change the basis for the reasons I outlined earlier from a financing and stability perspective, the way in which professional rugby was sort of financed in Wales. And that led us to a decision to put in place a new professional rugby agreement. We'll call it PRA, Professional Rugby Agreement 2025. I'm going to turn this over to Abby for a bit, and I'll maybe come back in at the end of this, because we started that negotiation, or you started that negotiation in June 24?
We started the strategy development process with the clubs collaboratively in February 24, and we agreed by June 24, because that looked at what is the optimal number of clubs based on our population size, based on the financial ability of the union, based on what is, things like player cohesions, looking at how many players we've got, what's the pipeline. And we made a decision with the clubs at that point, June 24, that we were going to stick with 4 clubs. And we made that as a joint decision because it was felt the most important thing at that point was to get all 4 clubs onto a new agreement with more money, because at that point they were not competitive. And so we made that decision in June 24. We put an offer on the table in August 24, And we were still negotiating that in May 25. And in the
get the Dragons and the Ospreys to agree.
It was at that point we were still negotiating it with all 4 clubs, and we had put the offer in principle on the table in October, and I think that was there's so much history there. I was coming in there was a lack of trust on both sides. I mean, Henry's touching on the COVID loans. There was a huge amount of anger at the WRU, and that trust, when you're trying to negotiate a new deal, is really hard. So we were taking our time, and the clubs were working really hard as well. So it was a genuine commitment on all sides to get a deal done. In the intervening period, we lost all of the games in the Autumn Nations. We lost all of the games in the Six Nations. And then Cardiff went into administration in the April. So the whole headwinds, and this isn't just for Welsh rugby, these headwinds were actually happening elsewhere as well. And you saw what's happened in England as well in terms of some of the sustainability of their rugby system. And so when we actually got to the point in May when we couldn't get all the clubs to agree, so we got Ospreys and Cardiff to agree, we sat and we took the difficult decision as a board and said, things have changed too much, we cannot keep doing this. And what we had thought was the right answer back in the, almost a year previously, too many things had changed. And sometimes actually a leadership question you have to ask is just doing the same thing and going along the same path isn't necessarily always the right thing. So that was the...
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to that. There were probably 3 or 4 broad themes that we wanted to achieve going from PRA 23 to 25. The first was we wanted to change the economic risk on the clubs, because one of the things the clubs told us was that it's very difficult to manage with variable income. So because there were clawbacks, if the WRU did badly financially, the WRU clawed that money back from clubs under PRA 2023. So the economic risk in relation to the performance of the Welsh Rugby Union was actually vested on the 4 clubs in terms of PRA 2023. We recognised that wasn't the right place for it. We should be taking that economic risk because we were the ones who were actually trying to manage the money machine of the stadium and other things. And we thought it was fair, we transferred to us. So the first thing we wanted to give the 4 professional clubs was certainty going forwards over the next few years. The second thing we wanted to give them was an increased amount of money. You heard me say earlier that when I came into this, we were, I think, about 4.5 million per player squad. I think from PRA 2025 it was at least moving to 5.5 million the following year, then to 6.5, to get us into a period of time into which we were putting competitive money on the table. The third thing we offered in terms of PRA 2025 was to change the balance sheet risk in the clubs. Again, when I was involved in this, the clubs had variable levels of debt ranging from roughly about £5 million up to, I think, £10 million order of magnitude. And these were clubs which were turning over £10-12 million. You shouldn't have that much debt involved. It was crippling the clubs. So we made an offer to all the clubs to basically capitalise up to £3 million of that debt, take the debt repayment away and take the interest payment away. The final component was we did want a little bit more control over the rugby because it was difficult for us to actually get the rugby system working seamlessly between the international game, particularly, I'm talking about the men's game here, the international men's game and the men's club game. There was so much friction in that system. As Abby said before very well, there was very little trust between us and the clubs, and we've tried to be open and we've tried to change that over the last 2 years. And that was the fourth thing we wanted to achieve. So that was the backdrop to why we were trying to go from PRA 23 to PRA 2025.
I'm still not clear though, why did you not persuade the Dragons and the Ospreys didn't sign?
So the Dragons and Cardiff signed, Ospreys and Scarlets did not sign, and they felt that they hadn't been given sufficient assurance on how we were going to, it was over the Cardiff administration. Yeah. So there was, they wanted us to, there was a couple of things that they asked that we felt we couldn't do. So we gave them assurance that we would sell Cardiff. We didn't want to keep it indefinitely. We said we'd be completely transparent in terms of any money that we would spend on Cardiff. The things they asked me to do that I couldn't agree to, one was to, as owners of Cardiff, because we had taken it on when it went into administration, they asked us not to put the money in that owners were expected to put in, which would have meant, I felt, and I took this decision with the support of the board, Cardiff would have been left to basically decline. Now, I didn't think that was the right thing. It would have led to redundancies, it would have led to players leaving, and it would have led to poor performance. And if we were trying to sell Cardiff, actually it would have lost its value. So I didn't think that was the right answer. So we weren't putting any more money in. We were just putting in the equivalent of what the other 3 clubs were putting in. So then the debate became, well, you need to give us that additional money that you're giving Cardiff, but that wasn't affordable for us. So that was the key bit. We actually agreed to a lot of other assurances in a legal side letter because we'd got the deal agreed, but we couldn't agree to those 2 additional elements.
And the final element, I'm sure we'll pick that up with the supporters afterwards. I'm just conscious of time.
The final element was quite important actually. They wanted to sign off to how we sold Cardiff.
That was the other one. Yes.
And we weren't prepared to do that because the reason why we acquired Cardiff in the first place was to stop ourselves having over a £20 million liability, and we wanted to be able to actually deal with Cardiff in the right way going forwards and not to be in the hands of the 4 professional clubs in terms of taking that decision. It was our risk and we felt we should manage it.
Jill German, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the WRU set about a consultation on the reducing from 4 clubs. What do you believe will be the benefits to rugby in Wales of moving from 4 to 3 clubs? And bearing in mind that the WRU's consultation made the case for Model D, so 2 professional clubs, and said that was optimal in terms of financial stability and sporting performance. Will 3 teams be able to achieve your financial and sporting goals?
Can I kick off on this, or do you want?
Don't mind.
Go on. Okay. So I suppose the first thing to say is we recognise that change is painful, and we went into this understanding that this will be very painful for groups of supporters. We didn't know which groups of supporters, but it would be painful for some, and also there would be a great deal of media speculation, interest, and causing uncertainty in the game. We tried to deal with one very important aspect of that up front, which is that we guaranteed all player contracts across the board, so we didn't want the players to feel exposed through the consultation period, and we explained that to players face-to-face in a couple of consultation meetings. So we went into it with 2 clubs because we were concerned about the lack of concentration of players playing with each other. And as a board, we talked about it. We could have gone out with probably 3 clubs as well. But the things that we were trying to balance in this was probably 3 clubs gave more playing opportunities for our key players, 2 clubs gave less. 3 clubs was more expensive because you were funding 3 rather than 2. And the final thing was how much of the infrastructure, which just does not exist today in Wales, did we need to pay from a centralised basis with all clubs participating. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So we had interacted a lot during the summer with the retired international players from Wales, and one of the key themes that they told us was that the reason why this group of players were so good was because they went through a national academy. There was relatively few of them, and they got significant amounts of coaching. And so we wanted to replicate that in a national academy, and we've announced that we're going back to a national academy, albeit on 3 sites, but that will be run much more similarly to how it was run in the past, and we think that's an important piece of it. The second thing, which is widely trailed in the media, is that we're always second to the game in trying to find the new Welsh talent which is outside of Wales. The people who live on the borders, I came into environment. The very first professional rugby board meeting I went into, there was a debate around someone we had lost to England. And I was absolutely passionate about that. And I was like, why are we complacent about this issue? Why are we complacent about it? We should be fighting for talent tooth and nail. And in the new 28 million investment, that includes a talent management and identification unit, which will be much more proactive in finding that talent, whether it's inside Wales or outside Wales, supporting that talent through their education and actually supporting them into either a semi-professional or professional club. Part of this is actually building up the SRC as well, Super Rugby Cymru. So to create a good playing environment, or an improved playing environment, I should say, as a bridge into professional rugby.
Just wondered if you wanted to add to that as well.
Yeah, so and it's really interesting for me because my last day before I took medical leave was when we announced the consultation, and then I started to come back in when the results were coming back. So I was probably one step removed in actually quite a useful way. I think, firstly, it was a genuine consultation, and actually we were criticised at the start, people saying, they won't listen, they won't make this a genuine consultation. And I think that, as Richard said, it was a fine decision at the board, whether it was 3 or 2. There was some really strong views that, based on all the data that we were discussing earlier, that 2 was the best answer, and there was very strong views that it should be 3. So actually it was a fine decision, and so it was a genuine consultation when we went out that the optimal model was 2, but we put the other options in there. And then we listened, and when you look at all of the responses, it was one of the biggest consultations that's ever taken place in Wales. It shows the passion, you know, because wouldn't it be awful if we had apathy, and we don't have apathy, which I will take. And the responses came back. We genuinely listened, and we said we will do 3, because that was what people had told us was the right answer. As Richard said, it still isn't an easy answer, but everybody, actually, the biggest theme that came out for me reading it was that everybody agreed we needed to do something different and we needed to change. So that we did 3. The stronger footing we're on financially means that 3 didn't actually need to have a huge amount of sacrifice in terms of the money that we're still investing in the 3 clubs, which is good. I think some of the transformational levers that Richard just mentioned around things like the National Academy remained. The investment in the pathways, because that's what I've learned over the last 2 years, is that we'd stopped investing in the pathways. We'd stopped putting, investment into some of our key areas in Wales. We really said as a board, we can do 3, but we can't afford to water down the rest of it, and we haven't done that. And then I think the other bit is the transformational lever is much more significant alignment on the rugby operations, so that we'll be building things like that talent and insight. We'll build much greater connections between the national team and the clubs. I'd have been far more worried about that, Jill, if we'd lost that in the process and in the reform, because that's where the transformation comes for me, much more than the 3 or 2 club model.
Can I just add one other feature? One other feature here was obviously our clubs play in the URC, and I'm sure we'll want to talk about that in a moment.
Yes.
So not to give you a segue into the next topic maybe, but one of the things that I was impressed on, I did quite a few of the consultation meetings with Dave Reddin, and the one thing that came back consistently out of it was make the best choice for Wales. That may be an odd thing for me to say, but it's make the best choice for Wales. Because at the time, the URC were pretty clear that there were 2 acceptable answers for them. One answer was 2 clubs, and one answer was 4 clubs. 3 clubs was not acceptable because they couldn't manage it within their competition structure. So when I did the press briefing at the end of the consultation, I was very clear that we are moving to 3 clubs, even though today that is difficult from a URC perspective, and there are a broad range of potential solutions to solve that with URC, which I'm pleased to say we are working on that with them now collaboratively. But we made, I think, the right decision for Wales, not being beholden to a championship which our clubs were actually playing in at the time.
I'm sure we'll come back to that, because obviously it's what's best for Wales, not for what's best for the URC. So that's
absolutely right.
And fans have many, many strong opinions on that. Let me bring in Henry Tufnell.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, do you think you're... Oh, there we go.
See you later.
Hello.
So my apologies, we will have to suspend the sitting. We have 2 votes hopefully now, and so we'll be back as quickly as we can. My apologies for that.
Thank you.